September 18th, 2024 budget workshop to order at 6:02. We'll start with roll call. Brooke?
Present.
Kevin Glassy, present.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson? All right. We don't have anybody here for public comment, correct? There's no public here?
No public comments today.
Okay, so we will call up agenda item number 2, which is the budget and tax rate, starting with an update and discussion on the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget.
So we are wrapping it up. This is the end of our budget season. This is our last budget related meeting. Basically what is left to do today is we have slated for the final approval of exceptional items. So in your packet, you will see the exceptional item summary sheet that was approved, with the items that were approved at the last meeting. These have been rolled into the actual budgets that you'll see in the next item for budget approval. And so the only real, item left here in this budget workshop is to confirm and take an official vote on those exceptional items, and then have any other, budget related discussion before we move into the actual budget adoption in the next item.
Anybody have any questions, comments? One thing Ashley had pointed out to me was the discretionary salary increases, $100,000 that we had discussed previously. That now includes all of the kind of auxiliary costs. And so $100,000 is not the amount that is available for actual salary. It's about $80,000 of that, and the rest is, other taxes and benefits.
And retirement.
Yeah. So
yes, we put that in the budget as 80 towards salaries, and then roughly 80, and then the remainder going to those other expenses that accompany salary expenses.
and I do think we need to move on that soon so that staff knows what they're getting and how they're getting that, so that we for retention purposes and recruiting purposes and all of those, we just need to make sure that happens quickly. Yes.
As I recall, the manner that the language that we used when we approved that at the last month's budget meeting was that that $100,000 would be applied at the discretion of the city administrator and mayor. And I would suggest, after some discussions with our chief of police, that we focus on for discretionary increases for the police department, that we focus on what's necessary, how much of that would be necessary to get our police salary ranges up to current levels of comparable cities, for both our ability to fill the open positions that we have and our ability to retain our current officers. And that we also include authorization for any retention package, whether by salary or a one-time bonus that might be used for retention of some of our current officers, where in consultation with the chief of police, that's necessary to retain those officers. So I would like to just add not a specific requirement, but a request that those that the police department salaries be looked at first out of that $100,000 for those purposes, both to fill our open positions, get our salaries up to speed with adjacent communities and for retention purposes.
All right, we need to,
And then with that, I have no other changes to the proposed exception items or the budget as proposed.
Is that a change or just a comment or a suggestion or what is that?
What I just went through,
Yeah.
it is a strong suggestion to our administrator as she allocates that $100,000 to do so with a look first to the needs of the police department.
Good. Well, my suggestion is use your discretion as you think best in consultation with the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, we appreciate all of our staff, definitely our police, you know, and all of our staff know that we're somewhat constrained with our budget, so, but I mean, I can't think of anybody we don't want to retain, so.
Correct.
That's fair.
That's correct. We've been given information, as liaison to the police department. I'll just give some examples. Our current, new hire salary with the 4% COLA would be about $64,000. New hires at Manor get $67,000. New hires at Pflugerville get $65,000. New hires in Austin, it ranges from $65,000 and above.
Yeah.
So I think and I think that kind of difference shows across the board. And so we're not competitive. We need to be competitive in this market to get the kind of people to fill those positions, and that's what's behind my recommendation.
Understood.
okay. That was not an action item, so,
Right, not necessarily, as
Any-
long as we get just an affirmative that everyone's okay with the exceptional items as proposed.
okay. We will move on to agenda item number 3.
We need to make a motion?
No,
It's
not-
not it's not an action item.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance of the city of Rollingwood, Texas, adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget beginning on October 1st, 2024, and ending September 30th, 2025, in accordance with Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 102, providing for the filing of the budget, providing that this ordinance shall be cumulative of all ordinances, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. So, take it away.
Oh, right, of course. So what you have in your packet is 2 separate versions of the Exhibit A to this ordinance. So first we have the actual ordinance adopting the budget, and then it calls for an Exhibit A that is the actual budget itself. We have 2 versions here in the packet. The first is using the voter approval rate to calculate the current property taxes, which you'll see there on the very first line of the budget. That would be staff's recommendation, especially, given all of the exceptional items that have been approved, would be that the voter approval rate be the one that is adopted in the budget tonight. The second option is the actual no new revenue rate. That is the amount that would get us the same amount for maintenance and operations as we got last year. And so that is also an option, but again, to cover the exceptional items that were proposed, staff believes the voter approval rate is the way to do that. You also have a motion script in front of you because there's very specific language that has to be made for this these items. So we first have to have a motion to approve the ordinance with the selecting either the voter approval or the actual no new revenue rate. And then we also have to ratify the amount of a tax rate increase. And so based on the rate you choose, you'll fill in the blank there with the tax rate increase that is shown on the sheet. And so there are 2 motions that need to be made tonight, and the selection of one or the other exceptional, Exhibit A for the budget.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Move. Go ahead.
I would move that we approve the, let the language here. That we approve ordinance 2024-09-18-03, adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget that adopts the voter approval rate.
Do we need the dates in there? Okay.
Second.
Can we amend that to say adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget beginning October 1st, 2024 and ending September 30th, 2025?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, okay. All right, for the record, we note that Alec Robinson has now on the dais at 6:13, so. Okay,
Sorry.
that's all right. Any further discussion? Is this a record vote?
Yes.
So, okay,
Roll call vote.
roll call. So Brooke,
Aye.
Alec,
Aye.
Kevin? Bill?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Five ayes, no nays, the motion passes. And now we need a motion on the property tax increase. The rate.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of 0.2058 per $100 of valuation, which is effectively a 10% increase in the tax rate.
Is that the right one?
I think we're still on.
We're still on number
Well-
The
3.
second motion on
The
it.
second
Yeah.
motion?
Yes.
Okay, well,
The property tax,
can do
it's
that
the
one.
amount of the property tax increase.
You do that one next.
okay, I'll do that one then. I move to ratify the property tax increase in the amount of $270,139 reflected in the budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alex. Any further discussion? All right, this is also a record vote. So Brooke,
Aye.
Alec,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
aye. So, yeah, 5 ayes, no nays, that motion passes also. All right, moving on to agenda item number 4. This is discussion and possible action on an ordinance of the city of Rollingwood, Texas, approving the certified appraisal roll, setting the tax rate, levying and assessing ad valorem taxes for the use and support of the municipal government of the city of Rollingwood, Texas for fiscal year 2024 to 2025, apportioning the levies for specific purposes, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
All right, so now that the budget is approved, we do need to adopt a tax rate to cover the expenses that were approved in the budget. And so, based on the budget approval of the voter approval rate, we would like to, or we would want to select the ordinance 2024-09-18-04-A, which is the one that includes the voter approval rate in the ordinance. You also have motion script here in front of you for the requirement, the required language that needs to be stated in that motion.
Do I have a motion?
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $0.2058 per $100 of valuation, which is effectively a 10% increase in the tax rate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Phil. Any further discussion? All right, does this need to be
Yes, it should be.
okay, also a roll call vote, so, Brooke,
Aye.
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Aye.
Bill, and I. Okay, hearing five ayes, no nays, that motion passes.
Thank you all so much for a great budget season, and thank you to our staff who spent many, many hours
Yes.
going over every single dollar in the budget. And so we really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to carrying out the new budget.
Thank you for all
Thank
your
you
hard
for all
work.
your
I know
time.
that's a lot of effort. Okay, item number 5 is a public hearing on the discussion and possible action on a resolution reauthorizing all building permit fees in accordance with House Bill number 1922 in the 88th regular session.
Yes, this item is actually something that we are required as of last year to reauthorize all of our building permit fees every 10 years. We've decided to do this annually in accordance with the budget adoption, so that way it never falls through the cracks, and that any new fees that are enacted throughout the year then get added to this list of items that have been reauthorized. And so we do need to hold a public hearing on this item, and then would ask for approval of the resolution attached in the packet that includes the building permit fees. This does not stop us from making any amendments to it throughout the year to the building permit fees. This is just simply to make sure we don't lose the ability to charge those fees.
All right. We have a motion.
Oh, wait, we'll need a public hearing.
Oh, public hearing, sorry. All right, we call the public hearing to order at 6:19. Seeing as there is nobody here to speak, and nobody online to speak, we will close the public hearing at 6:19 and a half.
6:20.
Excuse me. Okay, now, do we have a motion? Brooke,
I move we approve the ordinance, draft resolution 2024-09-18-05, reauthorizing permit fees for the oncoming fiscal year.
we have a second.
Second.
Second by Alex. Any comments? I actually, where's Nikki? I had two, and this is just questions in the current fees that we have. Under section A2-001, the general fees, where it says includes, the fees listed below and 25 cents per square foot of project area, excluding areas defined only by linear feet. Can you explain what that means?
Excuse me.
So that means, basically any building or any permit that we do get in, increase in impervious coverage, increase in, building square footage, anything, or the, renovation of square footage, they will place that in, and it's 25 cents a square foot of that portion that will be reviewed.
Okay, so it's not just square footage of the building itself?
No, so
Okay.
it is if it's a brand new residence. So if it's a 5,000 square foot house, it is based on that square footage. That is what our reviewers are reviewing, is that 5,000 square feet.
What about the impervious cover driveways and all of that stuff, which would be new and would impact the drainage?
So that actually is a portion of the drainage, and the way I'm calculating it and the way I've been calculating it is based on what we have for our site development fees, which is based on a new site is, I believe, in our fee schedule, $1,200-1,500 maybe.
So that's
Not sure.
calculated separately.
Yeah,
or
so it's a
included
separate, it's a separate fee.
Okay,
Um,
so then what is excluding areas defined only by linear feet?
I do not know.
We probably need to
Say
figure
we've
out
done
what
it.
that
We
means.
Probably should. Honestly, there are quite a few fees in there that
maybe we
I
don't
wish would be
use or-
explained a little bit more, could be simplified. There's quite a few things.
Yeah, because that, you know, there's no linear feet in a house.
No.
So if that's what we're basing it on, we
Yeah,
probably need
be-
to,
it is, because it's placed underneath the building fees portion is where that's associated with, so,
okay.
Unless it's like a fence or something?
Yeah,
maybe?
that was the only thing I was
Right.
thinking.
quite possibly.
Yeah, but we probably should figure out what it means so we can answer
Yes,
that.
we need to know.
So this resolution's just to authorize the city to
what we
charge
have.
fees, but,
To continue.
if you wanna change your fee structure, how do you go about doing that? You could always bring us an amended fee structure.
Absolutely, we can do that by resolution.
And is that something y'all are working on to like review, like you mentioned, you'd like to see the fee structure change, so I assume that you are looking at that and coming up with proposed changes,
I
right?
can definitely push that forward if you'd like. I can push that forward if you'd like.
Well, I mean,
We've-
I don't know, I think that's between you and the rest of the
Absolutely.
administration, but it just seems like, I'm
there's
just thinking about
notes
how
that
I,
have
at
made.
work at my office, when somebody tells me I don't like the way that we do this and that it needs to be done better, then I
Right.
usually look at them and say, well, are you
Then fix
going
it.
to change it then and do it better, you know, so.
Sure. And we've put some stuff in place recently where we are now past the second review, and it's in this amendment or in this code, but past the second review, people are paying for all dollars spent on engineering for zoning reviews or drainage reviews. So the application fee and all of this applies to the first two reviews. If they go past that, if we go multiple times back and forth, if they want any meetings with the engineers, those are straight pass-through now. It's helped to get our fund back on track where it's paying for what it needs to, but ideally in the future, we would do a full fee study where we could find out what we could just charge up front to actually to make that work, as opposed to having to, right now, she tracks every hour that the engineers spend on it, and we pass those dollars through to our builders. And so it was a fast and an easy way to take care of the issues in that it wasn't paying for itself. But once we get probably, maybe a few more months under our belt of that, then I think we would like to do a full fee study. That would include likely bringing a proposal to council and going out for a fee study in our building and development department. So it's something we'd like to do.
And by a fee study, you mean having engineers look at the fee structure and compare it to the work that's been done and make recommendations?
Right, yeah, and I guess maybe not necessarily engineers in the past. We've gone out for the fee study before, and I think it was just a little expensive for us at the time, but it wouldn't necessarily be engineers, but someone who would come in and they would pull samples of all the projects we've done over the past, however many years, how much we charged them for it, what it actually ended up costing us. They would factor in things like staff time, overhead, just to make sure that we're capturing everything we need to.
And like, what does Westlake Hills do about that?
I'm not sure what their fee structure looks like. I know cities usually do a fee study, probably I would say every 5 or 10 years maybe. It would maybe be
It's
kind of
usually just
something.
depending on cost. Like,
Mhm.
And there's a
3 to
little
5.
industry of consultants that do that for you?
Mhm.
Okay.
Right. Similarly, how we do our water wastewater funds. We try to do those so frequently that at least we know we're covering our expenses, or if we're overcharging, we know we can amend that. So
Okay.
something we'd like to bring forward in the future for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because there was another one in here where demolition of a building is $600, and demolished structure attached to a building, $225. It's like, what is a structure attached to a building? That-
I guess a
Carport.
carport or garage, yeah,
that
not
just-
the whole building. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, that just seems like that could be, I'm sure there's others, but
Right.
anyway.
And there are some that we hardly, we maybe hardly ever use, and so it would be a good time to go back and assess how, what each of those costs us. And
Right. Yeah, like the one about moving a house. I mean, I'm pretty sure none of the houses in Rollingwood are getting moved.
I think that's just a standard of if you're moving through the city.
yeah.
Oh, passing
some
through
reason.
with a house?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I never thought
Bee
about that.
Caves Road.
Yeah.
I bet it happens, and I'll bet they don't get their permits. Pull them over.
That's
Okay.
yeah.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think you have a motion and second.
Right, that's what I said.
Oh,
We have a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Nobody's saying anything, so all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 4 ayes, no nays, motion passes. You what? Yes, I vote aye too. Okay, that was number 5. All right, next we have the consent agenda. Are we just rolling here? We're done with our budget workshop
We were
way
done
early.
with the budget
We're
workshop,
rolling.
yeah.
We're rolling and rolling.
Maybe, maybe we would return to, if we get more people showing up at 7, maybe we could return to public comments or something, but other than
Yeah,
that, I think
because
we
there's
can
no,
keep-
there's no separate public comment item
Right,
for the regular council meeting.
sure. We can always
So,
return to that around 7 if you'd like to
okay,
do that.
okay. Well, let's do the consent agenda because it should be fairly non-controversial. All right, consent agenda items include minutes from August 21st, 2024, minutes from September 4th, 2024, and the holiday calendar for city employees. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the consent agenda?
Is there a second? Okay, motion by Brooke, second by Phil. Any further discussion? Or any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, 5 ayes, no nays. Motion passes. Okay, now we are at the regular agenda. I just don't know if we're gonna have anybody who wants to comment or participate on this.
We can take a break if you'd like. That's an option if you want to call a short recess if you want to wait.
Yeah,
minute.
just because our council meetings normally start at 7, it's only 6:30. And if anybody is thinking they're gonna show up at 7 to comment on any of the items on here, that's a little,
Did we have a
Well,
separate posting for, so it would, everything was posted for 6?
We did post all of it for
Is there
6, but,
6? Okay.
But, generally our budget workshops do last about an hour,
they
so
do last a lot, or
Or-
more.
or
Or
more.
more, yeah, or more, so,
that would be optional.
Um,
We could call a break if you'd like, or,
okay.
I mean, I guess, Sarah, you're running it, so whatever you think is
That's,
best.
well, that's
I mean,
true. I don't think that most of these early things are not. Yeah, we still have some budget-related stuff that probably is not, it's not something that people would be commenting, since nobody's here for the budget portion. Probably this is not an issue either, so. We'll go ahead and pull up agenda item number 9. Under the regular agenda, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending ordinance number 2023-09-20-04, adopting and approving amendments to the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2023, and terminating September 30th, 2024, providing for adjustments of spending authority among budget line items, and providing for immediate effectiveness.
all right.
Go ahead.
So this end of year budget amendment applies to the current budget we are in, not the one that has just been approved. Additionally, when we were making our projected unexpended balances as we were working through that exceptional item document, and we showed you what we thought the end of year balances would be in different funds, this was taken into account already. So we had taken into account what we projected our different line items to end with, and so this has all already been factored into this. It doesn't change any of that. And I'll go ahead and hit kind of the highlights of what happened here as far as our end of year budget amendment. And I guess just also to mention, kind of the reason why we do this is next year when we go through the budget process, we'll look at what we budgeted the previous year, and we'll look at those kind of things to kind of determine what we need to budget for. And so it's helpful if we massively over or underspend in a line item, to make our budget reflect what actually happened, so that way the next year as we're planning, we have more accurate numbers to work with. And so this is really just a cleanup of the old budget. So some notable things, our current property taxes and our penalty and interest on taxes, we didn't quite collect as much in current as we thought we would, but our penalty, we collected more, and so those actually netted out actually to some additional property taxes there than we thought we were going to receive. Our sales tax, also, we budgeted very conservatively on sales tax. I think we probably even knew it was going to, go past the $625,000 that we budgeted for the general fund, but we always like to stay conservative because you never know about sales taxes, and so those actually did come in much higher than budgeted for, and so that was a good boost to our revenues. And then last in here is the grant revenues. That $55,000 is actually the TDEM grant we received finally for the 2023 winter storm. And so we've been working with them to get all of the required documents in, and it's a lot of documents, but we finally got it all taken care of. And so this is our grant from that storm. And you'll see later, we have a bit of an overage for our landscape remediation, which is over at that Edge Grove lot. You'll notice the trees and things that have been planted to kind of beautify that area. These funds helped offset that extra expenditure, because that was the area that ended up getting used quite a bit for the winter storm for storage of brush and materials. We also had some additional court fines than we thought we were going to get. Those ones are always hard for us to tell, how much we're going to get, hard to project, so we did have a little extra there, bringing our total revenue of an increase of about $377,000. So we brought in more than we thought we would. Moving on to our expenditures, couple highlights here. Communications and outreach, the city council did approve the CRCRC to spend some additional money for out of the communications and outreach line item, and so that accounts for the $8,000 overage in that account. That was a previous approval. The computer software and support was also a previous approval from city council for the IT contract. We brought the proposal and they had an option for financing, but the council felt like if we had money to, take care of that in our general fund, that we should just pay for it and not go for the financing. And so that accounts for that $100,000 overage. We actually, I think it was a not to exceed amount of 110 or so we came in a little under budget for what that's worth. And then of course our 4B sales tax allocation, that's us paying that back to the RCDC. And of course, because it went up for how much we received, we also paid them more, so it went up the same amount there as well. Development services, we're getting a better handle on our review fees and our different kinds of consultations. So a lot of those we didn't spend quite as much this year as we had in the past. As we get better relationship with our reviewers, we're able to take care of those and do some more of that on our end, so it doesn't cost us quite as much. Also of note here, the elevation and height verification, that was the first year that we had these in the budget. They're actually, ATS charges us only $500 per instance, and so we way over budgeted, just not being sure kind of how that was going to shake out, and we didn't need quite as much of that funding, so we'll know that for next year when we budgeted, or we did know that when we did our budgeting. And then the survey benchmark network also came in $10,000 under budget, as ATS let us know when they were doing the project. They found a way to do it a lot cheaper than we had originally budgeted for, so that saved us some money there, so we appreciate them. Under sanitation, our landscape remediation, this was that overage I was mentioning about for the Edge Grove lot. Again, that was largely covered, more than covered by the TDEM grant that we got for the restoration of that area. Let's see. Nothing really too large of note in utility billing. Street sweeping, we did decrease that quite a bit because we're doing that in-house now. The Public Works employees are taking on that. They have the machinery now to do it, and so we don't have to pay for the contract to take care of that. We just buy the materials and things that they need to do that. Street maintenance and repairs, that had a pretty significant decrease, mainly because we didn't actually because of where we are in the water CIP project, we weren't ready to do massive repaving or anything this year. That's all been shifted to next year. So that's why that has gone down significantly. Police department, most of the savings there are generally salary related, vacancy savings, things like that. If we're down employees, we don't end up paying as much as we thought we would, and all the different salaries and other line items related to that. We are seeing a slight increase in our credit card fees in the court department, so we will be having to increase those. Our legal services, a small increase there too, as we actually had some more dockets this year than we had in the past. Nothing big to note here in the park department unless you have any questions. Public Works, you'll see the maintenance on the building had a bit of an overage, and that is actually for the AC unit that was also approved by City Council, so thank you for that. We're all staying cool now, and we appreciate that. So our expenditures went down by about 216,000 from what we budgeted for, and so that actually puts us to the good almost $600,000 extra. So more from what we planned last year, we actually added $600,000 to the reserves, to the unexpended balance of the general fund.
I was gonna ask a quick question
Yes, of
before you go on.
course.
So on the court credit card fees,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way that we can assess those fees to the people that are paying?
I believe we actually do in court. I think we just have to still account for it as what we've spent. But let me go back and get an official answer on that. But I believe in court we do pass it on to the users, but in utilities we do not. In
Okay.
utilities, the city does not pass on we might actually pass on the fee in utility. I'd have to get
Well,
an
this
answer
one
on
is
that.
specifically a court credit card
Right.
fee. So-
Right. Those I believe are passed on, but I will find out if
Okay.
not. We're also in the middle of assessing between Encode, which is the system that we used for our billing. They have multiple options for credit card processing, and some of them cost more and some cost less. And so we're in the middle of looking at what we can do, whether it's accepting only certain kinds of cards or things like that that could possibly reduce those fees that we're paying. But whether it is, paid for by the actual end user, it still has to be shown as an expense that we pay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
But I can
just
find
wanted
out
to
if
make
that's
sure
a-
that we were kind
Yes.
of like building fees, you're passing it on to the people that are
right.
responsible for incurring that cost. So.
Yes, and now that I think about it, I think in the utility bill, we also have that, but I believe we have so many other payment options normally before someone comes and pays with a credit card that we can get them to do a different option that doesn't include the fees. We always tell them there is a 3% fee, and if you'd like to not, be assessed that fee, you can do
Like ACH
one of
or
our,
something?
we have
Okay.
ACH, we do checks, so we have other options for that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes. Okay, our water fund, you'll see a lot happening in the water and the wastewater fund. A lot of that is due to the meters. So the meter project that we weren't, 100% sure how much it was gonna cost us or when we would get it completed. So, you'll see we added a revenue line item for the capital lease proceeds from the meters. That is the amount that when we went out and got the lease for them, we got that money all up front so we could buy all of the meters. Let's see. Maintenance and repairs were actually not as high as we had experienced in the past years. That's good. That's also gonna be going down as we continue to do additional maintenance on our system and update our lines where they're needed. The expenditure there that about matches the amount that we got in was our electronic meter project. That was us paying for the project to be completed. You'll see the exact same costs in the wastewater fund because it was split 50-50 because the meters are responsible for both our water and then for our wastewater billing. We did get to take out the 50,000 that we had budgeted for meter replacement because we're no longer replacing meters one by one. They're all in and they are new and fresh, and they're all have warranty on them, which is great. In the future, if we do have anybody who upsizes, that will hit this account, but they will be charged for it on the other end, or we're working on kind of finalizing what that policy looks like, and we'll bring that back to you all. Let's see. Water purchased was down quite a bit from what we budgeted for. We generally just try to use an average of the last 5 years and try to get an idea, but depends on if it's a hot or dry year, so we didn't actually end up purchasing as much water as we thought we would, meaning we also didn't bill as much as we thought we would, so it should all shake out there. And then our water fund totals, we are actually, because of our increase in revenue, and though we did have some increases in expenditures, we're 112,000 about added to the water reserve for the end of the year. Street maintenance sales tax just shows that same increase in the sales tax that we receive, or that we got this year in the for our general fund and our other sales taxes as well. So just that reflects that increase. The transfer to street department decrease of 150. That's just because we didn't end up spending that 150,000 on the streets, and that was actually shifted to next year's budget, so that way we can do more projects at once. And again, we ended up with about 200,000 being added back into the street maintenance department after the end of the year. We're almost there. Capital projects. This is our bond stuff for our new, the most recent bond. So we recorded our bond premium issuance and interest in here that was not in the budget before. Our expenditures was for water CIP packages 1 through 4. We originally didn't know how much we were going to spend this year versus next fiscal year. Now we have a good idea of that, so we lowered this current fiscal year down to just over $2 million, with the rest of the money on the water CIP projects to be spent in next fiscal year. Moving on to our drainage fund, we actually did not know for sure that, if the Nixon and Pleasant and Hubbard Hatley projects were going to get approved with this, completed in this fiscal year, and how much. So we actually hadn't budgeted for those. This is an amendment to account for how much has been spent to date on Nixon Pleasant and the Hubbard Hatley drainage projects. Those are covered by the tax notes from 2020. Our wastewater fund, again, you'll see the meter, same thing you saw in the water for the capital lease proceeds for the meter, and then also the similar expenditure for us actually doing the electronic meter project. Our grinder pump maintenance and replacement was up a little bit from what we had hoped. You just kind of never know how much you're going to spend on those. It depends. They're all sort of reaching the end of their life at this point, and so we are having a lot more maintenance on those than we were expecting. And we did, in the exceptional item process, we did put in an item for, a line item at least, for possible payment or customer contribution to the grinder pump maintenance. Have not decided what that looks like yet, but we do plan on getting the utility commission involved and talking about getting a bit of a small rate study here to determine what we might need to do in that line item. Our wastewater fund, we did also end up adding just a little bit to the total in that department of 32,000 for the year. And so with that, all of our, after all of our amendments, all of our budgets ended up with more money than we thought they would at the end of the year. So that's a good thing, and I think this cleans it up nicely for next fiscal year. And that is all.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance?
Well, go, you can make a motion.
Oh, I thought you were
I
going to.
I wanted to do discussion. I wanted to ask Ashley something, but we can do the motion first.
Oh,
Don't want-
Okay.
Either way, yeah.
I move we approve draft ordinance 2024-09-18-09, end of year budget amendment with attachment A as contained in the package.
You have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Brooke, second by Alex. Is there a discussion?
Yeah, can you, on the electronic meter project, like, what is that gonna look like next year? Like, you mentioned that we get these revenue from the capital lease proceeds, and then we spend it, obviously, in each one of those funds. That makes sense to me, but what is it gonna look like next year?
So the only thing that you'll see next year, we won't have any more capital lease proceeds, and we won't have any more under 5192, the electronic meter project. But down, if you look at line item 5496, that's the financing note. So that amount, 26,000, will pay from water and wastewater every year for the next, I think it's 10 years until they're paid off. And so that's going to be take over as the contribution for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Any other?
I had one other question. What's the, you told us about the grinder pumps. I understand we have this question about who's gonna maintain them and the cost and all of that. And you say that's going to the utility commission and then it's gonna come back to us, or?
I think, we're open to, maybe starting that conversation here at the city council, maybe set some expectations of what we might want to see and what the utility commission might want to consider. We were just waiting until it was formally approved in the exceptional item process, and, ideally, it would run through them at some point, but I think we would like some direction on how we would need to be starting to look at those fees.
So, can we get it on the agenda for our next meeting to talk about then? Because,
Of course.
I think we need to reach a threshold question about whether we even want to be maintaining those or whether we want to just turn that responsibility over to all the homeowners.
Well, there are some of them that are common.
Oh, yeah, that's not what we're talking about, though.
Right, this is, the
These are
individual
the
grinder
individual
pumps.
ones.
And I think probably the reason why the city is usually involved, and maybe, I'm not familiar with how a whole bunch of other cities do this, but you do want to make sure they're maintained appropriately. And so there is a concern too, if you completely pass off all of the maintenance to someone else, that we make sure that they're not making sure that, licensed plumbers are working on them who know how to, work on the actual grinder pump. And so it could, I guess, do real damage to our system if those are not acting appropriately. And so I think that's probably why the city's been involved in it. And, perhaps we could look at either a monthly fee to residents, having them, just splitting costs of major repairs, though again, that could also spring them with a large bill, at one time. And so those are kind of things we might want to weigh. I know, I think Westlake Hills currently, I believe that they're looking at switching to a monthly fee, but I think right now, the homeowner pays a certain percentage of the maintenance cost. If there is something goes wrong with it, then the homeowner does have to pay part of that. I don't know what the percentage is, and I don't know how much they're looking at moving to for the monthly fee, but kind of two different ways to look at it. You could have a more consistent, but maybe would you pay for all the maintenance needed or not?
Right, and who's gonna pay the monthly fee? Everybody or just the people who have grinder pumps?
Mm-hmm. Right. I think it would be, likely just those that have it, so that way it's spread over those who are,
Actually
taking
using
care.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So-
Well,
okay.
because really, right now, we are all paying for it.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
And that's why I thought it needed to come up, because my recollection from our last discussion was that just didn't seem to make sense to me.
Mhm.
And, we,
Right.
seems like we could dispose of it pretty quickly by coming up with a monthly fee that just applies to the homeowners that have them,
Mm-hmm.
and just copy Westlake's fee.
Right. Absolutely. We will put that on next council meeting agenda, and we'll have maybe some more information of how some other cities handle it.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5 ayes, no nays. Motion passes. All right, agenda item number 10. Discussion and possible action on a resolution approving a budget for the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation of Rollingwood, Texas, for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2024, and ending September 30th, 2025.
All right. The RCDC did approve their budget for fiscal year 24-25 on August 19th. The Texas Local Government Code does require that the City Council approve all expenditures of the RCDC, and so that is why we are here to pass this resolution to approve the RCDC budget for fiscal year 2024-2025.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move, we approve, resolution 2024-09-18-10, a resolution approving a budget for the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation, Rollingwood, Texas, for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2024, and ending September 30th, 2025.
We have a motion by Alec. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Phil. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, agenda item number 11, discussion and possible action to review the City of Rollingwood investment policy and to approve an ordinance requiring the annual review of the investment policy.
So this, there have been no changes made to the, sorry, I'm off. There have been no changes made to the investment policy since last year. This is something we do annually as a requirement of our investment policy and of the government code. And so we are looking for approval of the ordinance in the packet, 2024-09-18-11, that does approve the investment policy.
All right, do I have a motion?
I
Somebody?
move approve ordinance 2024-09-18-11, an ordinance of the City of Rollingwood requiring written investment policy be adopted, requiring no less than annual review of the city's investment policy and investment strategies, requiring the city record any changes made to said investment policy or investment strategies, requiring appointment of the city's investment officer, providing for severability, and establishing an effective date.
All right, thank you. Motion by Alec, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Phil. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed, say nay. 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, we are now to agenda item number 12. Discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of a capital improvements plan in accordance with section 2-338 of the city's code of ordinances.
Yes, so in the packet, you'll see the capital improvements plan. This has been adjusted slightly from last year since we reviewed it. I believe changes made since last year were, I believe last year the meters were on the unscheduled project list, and that project has now been completed and taken care of, and so that has been removed from the plan because it is completed. And then we also noted the additional general obligation bond that we took out in 2024 for the water capital improvements plan, showing that that is now fully funded by general obligation bonds. So the first 3 pages of this report generally deal with our capital projects, and then the Exhibit A, pages 4 through 6, is more our capital items. And so this is where our capital items list, where we've been trying to plan better going forward, how much we'll be spending each fiscal year in our larger capital items. Of course, it won't be perfect, but we'll re-review it every year and make sure it's staying as accurate as it can be. And this hopefully will help us as we plan out our future expenses. And so that is what Exhibit A is, and we are looking for approval of this policy or plan.
All right, do you have a motion?
Move approval of the capital improvements plan.
All right, motion by Phil, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alec. Is there any discussion? Hearing no comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Say 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes. Agenda item number 13 is discussion and possible action on a budget management and review policy.
This policy has also not changed from last year, but we are starting to do this annually with the budget process. This policy just governs how budget requests are made by our departments. It talks about the whole process from approval of the budget calendar to adoption of the budget, the process for budget amendments, and then the quarterly budget review process, which is what we do at our quarterly meetings here. And so this policy basically just outlines that process. We figured that now that we've just completed a budget season, this is a good time to take a look at it. If there are any tweaks that need to be made, those can be made here. And then we'll have that ready going forward for our budget next year. So we are looking for any discussion if there is any, and then ultimately approval of this policy.
All right.
Move approval of the City of Rolling Woods budget management and review policy.
All right, motion by Alex, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Phil. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. No nays, so 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes. Okay. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, so we will suspend the meeting at 6:58 and come back in 5 minutes. meeting back to order at 7:07.
Refrigerator
And all participants are
Yeah.
still here.
from last night, left over.
Well, I gotta get my ice cream and cake or whatever.
It's not ice cream. I thought you weren't doing sugar anymore. Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, we are gonna go back, as we now have somebody here for public comments. So we're gonna go back to the public comment, that's actually not an agenda item, is it?
Right, just
So,
after.
Chauncey?
Thank you for holding on for citizen comments. Shanti J. Kumar, 3009 Parklands Drive. Let's see. Mayor, council, Mayor Pro Tem, council, city staff, neighbors. Last night, over 300 residents congregated to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of our police force. And the magnanimous offer of free food from celebrated restaurants was a big draw for the evening. The real excitement, however, for kids of all ages was the assembly of emergency services vehicles and personnel with their vehicles, including a boat used in water rescue, an outsized emergency vehicle capable of evacuating people from disaster events, and a lot of educative materials. And for the most sensational event, the 2 helicopters that presented a dust-filled but roaring landing and takeoff maneuvers. That will remain in the minds and hearts of many a child contemplating a career in those services. Thank you, Chief Munoz, and everyone who serves us 24/7 on the RWPD for what you do every day, but especially for organizing and hosting this the community event last night. It was a memorable event, and we are really indebted to you. Thank you also to Team Rollingwood, that's my short form for the staff at City Hall and Public Works who helped with the event. It was really the best show in town, honestly. Reflecting on history, as I always go back to, after last night's experience of the high level of expertise and the technology available today, I was recalling how it used to be in our city from its founding as the village in 1955 to a city in 1963 and onwards. We had the police force in 74, but everything else was volunteer run. As most of us know, maybe there are a lot of new people who may not know this, we have always been a community of volunteers, and hard though it is to recollect, fire services that included flood rescue was entirely a volunteer function until 1985, when Rollingwood residents voted to be annexed into Travis County Fire District Number 1. Harry Rogers served for 10 years as a volunteer fireman, and then for 8.5 years as fire chief of Rollingwood Volunteer Fire Department. It was a 24/7 operation, primarily from his home, but as reported by several sources, these volunteers served to rescue people from floods more than fires. There were very few fires in Rollingwood. They named 3 in the large lapse of time. Rogers almost lost his life rescuing travelers who did not know to respect the rising waters near Delana Lane. There is so much to say about our volunteer firemen and women, but I will just give you a brief summary of who they were and a few incidents from our history. All this came back to me after watching the high-tech stuff that was assembled up there, and I was like, wow, what did we have before? The founding meeting was in May of 1968, and who were these volunteers? A motley group consisting of teenagers, retirees, doctors, dancers, civil servants, rednecks, accountants, abolitionists, etc., and even little old ladies in tennis shoes. They met and trained twice a month. The department's biggest acquisition using city funds was the main fire engine. They called it Big Red. And some of you might have seen pictures of it. Big Red, okay. And that was $20,000. And then I have another photograph here of Harry Rogers standing in front of, I'll show you in a minute. This was Big Red. And I'm losing my mind here. Okay. Here's Harry Rogers standing in front of the newly acquired Big Red. Okay. I can put this up somewhere. Okay, let me go on. In May 74, the Rollingwood Fire Department reorganized to allow women to serve. Because when the men were at work, the women were the only ones who could come to a call if there was a fire. And they had to learn how to operate the fire truck and the ladders and everything. So they allowed women to serve. At the 1977 training, more women than men completed the 20 hours of training. And I'm going to show you all. This is just a picture of women and men who were the volunteer fire department of Rollingwood. You've probably seen all this, but anyway. One of the things that was very funny about this was they learned teamwork and how to, the ladies, as they took their turns up the ladder, huffed and puffed and swore that there certainly was a place for the men, and that none of this ever really was a woman's labor. But they still said, we're not women laborers, but there's no place for this. Okay. And then they said, this observation, one observed, men will stand around and kick the dirt and remain silent when in a group. But the ladies, they immediately start comparing the uniforms, how baggy they were in the bottom, how big the waist, that none can be found for the dainty, petite little fire persons, and that some coveralls are a sparkling white and some a telltale gray. So they complained about the uniforms, but not about the job that they had to do. It was pretty funny. And then Harry Rogers had a note in 1974 to prospective volunteers. The pay is non-existent, and you all can apply this to yourselves too. The pay is non-existent, the hours unpredictable, the glamour debatable, the chief is a tyrant, but other than that, the department is made up of a fine group of your neighbors who have volunteered to defend your home and property as well as their own from possible destruction by fire. One incident that speaks to the ingenuity of these volunteers was a time, I'm quoting this from newspaper clippings and stuff, when all the volunteers arrived at the fire in their cars and no one had brought Big Red, the fire truck. The blaze was supposed to be in the attic, so the men just stood on each other's shoulders, and this is for real, to check it out. To reach the attic, those buildings were not so tall back in the day, so they could do that. Finally, a little bit of humor right out of Harry Rogers' letter to the Hill Country News, November 1974, referring to how neighbors would go volunteer anywhere there was a need and not stop because it was outside their city limit. He quotes, "There was a city fireman who said to the county volunteer, 'That blaze is on the county side of the creek. You take care of it.'" Again, a quotation from a newspaper. So this is Harry Rogers finally talking about it. Let's hope that when we are in a position to do something important for the community or for someone, that we will take the time, initiative, and act. Think that someday you may stand before the pearly gates and hear St. Peter yell out to Satan, "You take him, he's on your side of the fence." These are exact words that Harry Rogers sent an article to this newspaper. And then this topic of the Rollingwood Volunteer Fire Department needs several sessions to discuss. Someday we should invite former volunteer fire department members like Eric Silverberg, Clark Wilson, Rick Borth, and a host of others who still live in our city, that they may be willing to share their history of so bravely serving our community. Big Red used to be parked in the current garage here. We will be coming full circle, getting a modern version, I think, of in the not too distant future, if the emergency services building gets located as per plans right next to City Hall. I hope that happens, sooner the better. But just to appreciate where we were and where we are now, we managed pretty good. I appreciate all the people that volunteered then and volunteer now. So thank you all very much.
Thank you,
you,
Shanti.
Shanti.
All right. Moving on, because we have our K-Freeze engineer here, we will go ahead and call up agenda item number 15. Update and discussion and possible action regarding change orders associated with the Nixon Pleasant Drainage Project, Hubbard Hatley Pickwick Drainage Project, and Water CIP Bond Program Packages 1 through 4.
I'll kick this one off just a little bit. Throughout our projects that are being working on, Water CIP, Nixon Pleasant, and Hubbard Hatley, various change orders have been identified as they've been working on those projects. You'll see here that we've put a little table together that shows, what the item is, the cost of it, the proposed source of funds. I'll say that is definitely, recommendation and can be discussed as to where we want to do that, to take those funds. And then the council approval needed column is trying to reflect what we felt could or could not be covered with the current contingency we have. Again, I think we have some room to discuss here and talk about where those might be paid out of, but I'll turn it over to Greg to speak a little bit about the actual change orders that are here and things we need to do.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley, and good evening, council. So we just had, as the contractor's been working on both the drainage projects and the water CIP project, they found some conflicts in the field that were unforeseen. The main one is number 1 in that table was a sewer line conflict on the Nixon Pleasant project. So that change order is to lower a portion of that wastewater line to go under that storm culvert. And we are currently working with the contractor. There's some questions about a service to 300 Nixon, about whether that is served off of Nixon or Pleasant. We've looked at some videos that might think we are not going to be in conflict. So we're hoping to resolve that this week. That could reduce the overall length that this line would need to be lowered, reducing that cost. So that is
Greg,
one thing.
If I could just interrupt you right there, I do want to give a shout out to Jerry Fleming and Kevin Shell. They've been kind of instrumental in this project and determining, what this change order, where we might be able to save some costs, determining where different service lines are. And so thanks to them, we likely will be able to lower the cost of this change order. And so we really appreciate their involvement and being active in this project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that a gravity line there, or is that?
Yes, ma'am. It's a gravity line. And so what we'd be doing is basically between two manholes, reducing the slope to drop it so that it gets below the storm culvert. And so the storm culvert needs to be shallower just because it's collecting the flows from the inlets. And so we have a little bit more flexibility with that sewer line.
Okay. And because so we don't have to change anything past just the section between the two manholes.
That's correct.
Is that a linear foot estimate of cost, or is that something you can't bid it yet because you haven't figured out or is it going to get bid?
No, so that's something that would be, the contractor gave us a price to do that work under the existing contract. And so they basically broke out the material pricing, how much labor it would take them to do. And we've reviewed that with the inspector and feel comfortable with the value that they've given us.
Okay, thanks.
The second one is also a Nixon Pleasant. The main cost there is associated with adding some boulders on the downstream side of the culvert. One of the residents requested some additional boulders to be placed there. So the cost there, the contractor has excavated some limestone with the excavation, so they're able to use native material. So that cost is just for the manpower to clean those boulders up and get them placed at the end of that culvert. The third one is also Nixon Pleasant. There was an there's an existing asbestos concrete water line that was found to be in conflict with the channel. Looking at the GIS, we thought this line was on the opposite side of the property. This is associated with some investigative work to make sure that line was abandoned. There was a portion of it that was abandoned and a portion of it that was live. So once we determined that there was no existing services off of that line, we were able to cut it at closer to Nixon, and then they removed that line. With asbestos concrete, there are specific sub-consultants who are certified to be able to handle that type of pipe, and so that's where a lot of that cost came in, is the contractor couldn't do that work themselves. So that was the big cost on that one. The good news, the one thing I will mention on that is that was one of the backyard water lines that we identified as needing to be abandoned at some point in the future. That was on the radar. It just was not where we thought it was. Number 4 is at the Hubbard-Hatley line. There was some potential conflicts with some water lines and a service that the contractor did some investigative potholing for that one. And then the last one is for the water contract. There's various items here. The big one is that on Ewing Circle, the existing line, there was no existing valve, so we could not isolate it. And we worked with the city and we couldn't figure out exactly how to shut that down. So what the contractor had to do was insert a valve on that existing line while it was live. That allowed them to then abandon the rest of that line after the new line was installed. Then there's just a couple various other items here, adding a gate valve to a fire hydrant and adjusting a valve on South Crest. And then also on Inwood Cove, we had asphalt paving on that, but it was a concrete street, so they ended up just patching the concrete trench for that one. And so you'll see they deducted the surface milling and asphalt work for that street as well. So that's an overview. Happy to answer any questions.
And I'll point out too, on C, D, and E, you'll notice that we listed as for the source of funds, we listed all 3 of those for water contingency funds. The reason we did that, of course, E was related to the water CIP and would definitely, be eligible to be paid for out of the water contingency. C and D, though they were found in conjunction with drainage projects, so the first one with Nixon Pleasant, the second one with Hubbard-Hatley, it all involved water-related projects, water lines that were conflicts, that were, removed in the case of the asbestos concrete line. And so we did identify those as eligible to be paid for with the water contingency funds. And that is why we listed those there and put no on council approval, because that contingency fund has already been approved. However, they don't need to be paid for out of that. If there's another way and we want to preserve that contingency fund, that's something we can do as well. Additionally, it was brought to our attention today as we went back and looked, we had been operating as though we did not have a contingency fund for the 2 drainage projects for Hubbard-Hatley and Nixon Pleasant. We went back and listened to the motion, and there was actually a 5% contingency approved for both of those projects. I think we operated as if we didn't have one because the actual bid, not including the contingency, went almost all the way up to the $2 million. And so there was an additional tax notes to actually fund that contingency. And so we were treating it as if there was not a contingency. It does appear though that there was a small amount. I think it was 30-something thousand for Hubbard-Hatley and 68 or 69 for Nixon Pleasant. And so that may be something, again, ultimately we will have to come up with those funds. So it may not change too much about the actual mechanics of it, but it could, we could technically, consider that part of those contingency funds. And so the kind of what we're proposing here for source of funds and whether or not council approval is needed, we would just kind of like to discuss that and definitely want to give the go-ahead at least to the contractor to move forward with the change order items that they have not already. Some of them have been completed because they had to be, and like the asbestos line has already been abated, that's all gone, so that is something that does need to be, of course, paid for, but we do want to give them the go-ahead to move forward, particularly with A, that's the large item for the Nixon Pleasant, the wastewater line relocation. And like Greg mentioned, that actually will probably be cheaper than what we're showing here. Likely that cost will be lowered, but we don't know what that number is today. And so our recommendation would be, approval of not to exceed that amount. And we can always come back in at a later date and do a change order or, approve removing that amount for that change order down to what it actually costs us. So
Have y'all exposed that sewer line already? Is it sitting there?
Yeah, that's correct.
And
Yeah,
it-
and so the contractor, when they did their potholing, they determined that it was different than what we had showed in as-built, so they were able to give us an accurate elevation for that.
And does it just intersect the drainage channel? Is that what's
It's
happening?
for the box culvert that's under Pleasant, under the street in Pleasant is where the conflict is.
Oh,
they're
okay.
kind of parallel,
Yeah,
sort of, but
They merge.
yes, they do.
yeah.
Okay.
And so there's that one service that's in question that would, the extent of this extends up to capture that service. If that service doesn't need to be lowered, then that's where that reduction in length comes from.
Great. Thank you.
Of course.
So was the Almerian Way conflict, was that on that line that we had the leak that they couldn't figure out how to shut off a while back?
Marion Way.
There was a bad leak over there on the line that they could not,
At the Hubbard Hatley, near
right
At
by the
that
lift, like by
triangle.
the lift station number
Mhm.
3, right down there. Down at the bottom of the,
I know when that happened that they installed a valve at that time. I think while they were doing that because of that, because it ran so long. I think they did something at that time. I don't know. I'm not sure if that was part of this or if they did any additional work on that in this change order.
I don't know if we ever figured out where that line was coming from and going to, and if now it's causing problems.
Right.
What is it?
Yes.
We've had several of those around here. That
Pretty sure.
I have one question. I noticed looking at the engineering plans for the Project A, that there are elevations in there that were incorrect originally and were corrected. Are we correcting them also to ensure that they're consistent with our new citywide elevation markers? Now that we're building these new facilities?
So what I would recommend, or what we can do, is just have it updated in the GIS. So the GIS data for the manholes themselves have data for elevations of the top and the bottom, and so we can get that corrected there.
And correct it so that whatever is reflected on the as-built when this project is finished will correlate to our citywide elevations, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the citywide
Sure.
elevation.
Yes, yeah, we will work with ATS for anything that changes during any of these projects. We will have those manholes resurveyed so that our full network stays accurate. Yes,
So that
absolutely.
we're updating whatever old elevations we have
Right,
Mm-hmm.
as
absolutely.
projects
Okay.
to our new elevation system.
Yes.
Okay,
We will do that, absolutely.
good.
All right.
Well, I would move that we approve the work for the change orders and that we approve it not to exceed the cost amounts that are shown in the staff memo, and that we request that staff update the council on these projects once they're completed.
Second.
Okay, motion by Brooke, second by Kevin. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes.
Right.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you,
Have a good
Greg.
night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, And then knock out a couple other quick ones. Pull up agenda item number 16. A discussion and possible action on a resolution denying Texas Gas Service Company's requested rate increase.
Yes, so a couple months ago, we approved an ordinance suspending the rates while the rate increase study was undertaken. This is the actual the resolution that would formally deny the rate increase. I will say, we would still like to pass this tonight. That's still a request. However, I believe it looks like they're going to settle, actually, as opposed to, that they've already worked something out between Bricado, which is the company or the firm that's kind of representing the small cities on this project. They have already reached out and said that they're likely already settling this project or this rate case down from the 25 that is presented to about 19, and they feel like it's a reasonable increase. It's a good lowering of that amount, and so they are planning on doing that, but they do still want us to go ahead and move forward with our denial of the rate increase if for some reason that settlement does not end up going through. And so we are requesting approval of the resolution here tonight, and we will share that with the Bricado law firm so that they can register that Rollingwood is also supporting this rate denial.
All right. You have a motion? Brooke?
I would move approval of resolution 2024-09-18-16 regarding denial of the Texas Gas Service Company's requested rate increase, requiring the company to reimburse the city's reasonable rate-making expenses as proposed.
All right, motion by Brooke. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Phil. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion is passed 5 to nothing. All right, agenda item number 17. Discussion and possible action to adopt a resolution to designate Michaela Rodriguez as the acting city secretary.
So moved.
Perfect, there you go. I like it.
Quick and to the point. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'll just say that this is definitely a well-deserved step, and I believe that Michaela is going to make a great city secretary for us. Currently, this resolution just makes it acting city secretary. We'll move forward with the interim position. Just make sure Michaela likes the job as much as we like her doing it, and then we'll plan on, after a short interim period, we'll reevaluate and bring it back to council. But at this time, we're very happy to recommend that Michaela be our acting city secretary. So.
Thank you. All right.
Congratulations.
Any additional discussion?
And don't drop out of graduate school.
Yeah. Don't quit school.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 5 to nothing. Okay. We will go back now to agenda item number 14, which is a discussion of possible action on the site plan for 3012 Kincaid Road.
So the city did receive an application for site plan approval for 3012 BK Road. In the one sheet that is attached for this item, you will see the site plan requirements that are listed in our city's code of ordinances under section 101-94, which is basically that the proposed improvements show compliance with all applicable city ordinances. 2, whether the proposed improvements would adversely impact the efficient flow of traffic within the city. And then 3, whether any aspect of the proposed development would create a financial obligation on the part of the city. 101.95 then goes on to discuss the site plan approval process that includes the city council being, acting on that site plan. after a report from the city administrator with the regard to the site plan application. And so what you have in your packet is a report that lists out those requirements that our code lists out about what the site plan must meet. You will also find the various, the site plan sheet, various approvals by K. Freese and Associates. This does meet our drainage and our zoning requirements. There is also a traffic impact analysis worksheet and a permit through TxDOT for their driveway. So that has been approved and they have gone through that process as well. So it is now here before the council. Staff does believe that it meets all of the requirements in our code, and it does require city council approval.
All right. And there's nobody here for the applicant. Right, nobody
That is
online.
correct.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move we approve the site plan for 3012 Bee Cave Road.
Okay, motion by Kevin, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alec, and is there any discussion?
What are they building this for, office or owner occupied or some lease space? It said tenant signage on the front.
I don't know the answer
And,
to that.
and where is it exactly?
3012 Bee Cave, it's kind of,
I guess I could do Google
It's
Maps.
right on the curve where we just had the TxDOT just fixed the guardrail.
right. And I'll say, I did put a call into TxDOT too about the driveway permit and, basically wanted to find out what that process is, whether, the safety of that area came into play. And basically, they do normally take into account, what kind of building it is, what kind of use it will be, how much it will impact the area. But in Texas, you're not allowed to disallow somebody access to a property, and that is currently the only access that property would have is onto Bee Cave Road. So they did approve a driveway permit for it, though. I think normally they would be a little more, have a little more requirements on, the safety and turn lanes and coming in and out of that property. But they did as best they could, and they have approved a permit for that driveway.
So I have two thoughts on this. The first one is that is a really blind curve where this is located. And for somebody coming out of this location and trying to turn left onto Bee Caves Road seems very hazardous to me. I would love if you have looked and you have any thoughts, Chief, that I don't know if there is any requirement for TxDOT to have right turn only exit from that, but it just, to me, I regularly am coming in and out of the parking lot at the Palisades, and except maybe on a Saturday morning, I do not turn left onto Bee Caves Road because you just can't see the traffic coming both directions because it's coming around a curve on both sides, and it's really, you have to clear both directions, and it's very difficult to see that. And so I come down Edge Grove to turn in, and when I'm leaving, I turn right and I come back down Rollingwood Drive because that's just the safest way to do it. But that's my choice, that's not a requirement. And I don't know if we have the ability to require them to, change their driveway such that it kind of precludes a left turn exiting the property or not.
I did put a call into TxDOT. I unfortunately do not have an answer for that at this time, but whether that would be something that, they would require as a condition of their permit, or if it's something that we would just work with the property owner on. I'm sure they'd be more than open to that conversation. I'm sure they want as much safety for that, the entrance and exit of that process.
What
project as
would
well,
we
so.
be asking them to agree to, that people can only turn right?
Right turn only.
And if people want to go left on Rollingwood, they'll turn right and then do a U-turn, on Bee Caves, they'll turn right and do a U-turn in the middle of Bee Caves Road.
Well, it's just right there by Walsh Charlton.
Yeah, but if they're wanting to turn left to go over to Mopac, they're gonna turn left, or they'll U-turn in the middle of the road. Cause it's not illegal to U-turn in the road, is it?
No, but I think unfortunately, turning right will also force them to use Rollwood Drive too to get to Mopac frontage to be able to go toward, so could we inadvertently be sending people down into the city? Or, you know, on Rollwood Drive, because that's their only way to get back to Mopac frontage. Cause a lot of people don't use like Liberty Park and whatnot to go onto, cause they don't know how to maneuver back in that area. So I
I'd love
think
to
we
get rid
could-
of McDonald's curb cut on Rollingwood Drive where people turn onto Rollingwood and then stop, which they're not supposed to do.
Right, so we have had officers working that as well, that no left turn.
Yeah,
To try to get
that's
that to
good,
stop.
cause that's a mess, but, I mean, I understand your point, I think it's a good safety consideration that you've raised. It's just that I don't know that there's a good solution to it.
I would agree, I agree completely with you, Sarah, but literally yesterday, coming out of Trader Joe's, which they've got that turn and gone through capes like that, I was stuck behind somebody because they were absolutely gonna go across and turn left across the lanes. And so, you know, people do what people do, you know? But I do think that, to Sarah's point, if we can work with TxDOT and if they do make those recommendations, if we make the driveway to where most logical people will think you turn right on it, and because it's such a blind curve, that would be much safer.
Right.
I don't know, but this is an entrance and exit. So that, I guess you would have a concrete island.
You could have like a little
or
island in
something.
the middle so that you could
Right,
turn in from either direction, but only turn out
right.
that would direct you that way.
Right, and we already do have TxDOT's attention only because we are having accidents in that general, area as well when it rains and whatnot. And we did recently have a fatality not too long ago, in that area as well. So like I said, we do have their attention. Right by 3010, there is there's not a turn lane. It basically, that turn lane disappears. And so that might be another option for us, is like that they actually produce a turn lane at that location to cause you to basically kind of create a chicken lane to, when you exit, that you're not just fully exiting into oncoming or traffic.
So that chicken lane disappears right there?
Correct, right there in front of 3010.
And TxDOT did say that normally in the cases like this, they would require a right turn, like a right turn in lane, where they would have to go into the right of way and do the right turn in, but there's not enough right of way in this
Right.
in this case to do that. So they said that's normally something that they would look at requiring in this case, but there's just not room for it.
Yeah, cause I mean, curb cuts are TxDOT's deal, not ours, and I'm sure they've already considered what they can do with it.
Probably, yeah, I think
Sounds
it would
like.
just be talking to the contractor. But I did ask, in case they have any thoughts on that, but we could probably just talk to the property owner. But again, it sounds like it's kind of either way is not an ideal situation.
Right.
Do we know how many parking spaces? I mean, I know.
12.
Yeah.
It looks like
I-
there's
I
12
can
parking
count,
places.
but I was just wondering if that, okay.
That's,
What's the speed limit along there? I know how fast they drive,
40.
40.
Yeah.
It's 40.
but they do like 55.
It's
or
40.
through there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something else we could consider, is lowering the speed limit through there?
I do not see TxDOT lowering that speed limit.
Right.
They probably will put a cautionary speed on those curves, but I don't see them lowering the speed limit.
the only other thing I noticed on here is the height of this building. And I don't remember us ever discussing the elevation adjustment in the commercial code. Does the height adjustment
Oh, yeah.
cover the commercial code as well, or is that just in the residential code?
It's 35 feet in the commercial code as well.
It's
I
30
think
feet
it's
in the
30
commercial
30.
It's
code.
30 feet.
Excuse me?
It's 30 feet, but I didn't know if we have the height adjustment in the commercial code or if it's
What
just.
what are you calling the height adjustment? Oh, the 10 feet? No,
Mhm.
it's not there.
Because this is a 40-foot high building.
That's a good catch.
I don't believe, well, I'll have to,
But we're
I
just,
may
We-
stand corrected, but if,
We never discussed it when we were talking about the building heights for the commercial changes.
they do have a building height, I can find it. They have a different definition of building height in
of course, site plan approval is not building permit approval, right? Because we don't have there's not a building permit application in, this is just a site plan. But I do think,
Well, but they probably
It's
need
already-
to
it's
know
got
if
the-
that's,
yeah, I think
an
it's a
issue or not.
good, it's a good point that we should note it
The-
for 'em.
the building height definition for non-residential buildings is the vertical distance from the lowest finished floor elevation, including a garage floor, to the highest part of the coping of a flat roof, the deckline of a mansard roof, or the gable of a pitched or hipped roof.
yeah,
So
so that
it
would be,
looks like
that would be
it's-
30 feet.
And it
this is-
allows the maximum height to be computed separately for each portion of the building containing a different finished floor elevation. If the lowest finished floor elevation is more than 4 feet directly above the point where the foundation intersects the natural grade, then the vertical distance must be measured from a point that is 4 feet directly above the point where the foundation intersects with the natural grade. So it looks like we need to have our code reviewers check this elevation on,
Well,
Another,
they
another
haven't
thing,
submitted a building permit.
well,
it's in our packet.
so yeah, this is, the zoning and drainage approval has been completed. I will say, this was a vested rights project, so we've actually been working
There's-
on this.
That's been in the code for a long time.
Yeah, we
Sure,
didn't-
I
we didn't
mean,
change it.
Right, I think it's from the 90s or 80s, 87 or something. We've had many a conversation between legal and engineers on this project, and they are vested in some certain aspects of their project. And so the approvals they have been given have been, fully vetted to make sure that they complied with the code at which they are vested under. And so that could have been different
But I
at
don't
that
think this
time.
adjustment was in place in 1987. Right?
That code language I just read, is that the question?
No, the residential code with the 10-foot adjustment, I don't think that was in place in 1987.
Well,
This-
I
this
don't
is
think
a-
that
isn't this
applies
a
to
commercial
commercial.
building?
It is a commercial building, but I'm saying it's not in the commercial code at all.
What I just read you was the
Right.
building height for a
Yes.
non-residential building.
Our commercial code does not include a building height adjustment for topography.
It does to the extent of the 4 feet.
Okay, which
Where
is not
it-
10 feet.
Yeah.
And
And it looks like we've got
Mhm.
34 feet, 11.5 inches, if I'm not.
it's 40 feet. It's 40 feet from the bottom of the garage to the top of the roof.
Okay, not according to the drawing I'm looking at, but.
Well, if you add up all of the pieces,
Yeah.
Is this an existing building or?
No.
No,
They
it's
wanna build a new
It's a
building.
new site
And,
plan.
and there's,
Yeah.
it's just a site plan, it's not a building plan, so they're not trying to get building permits, so there's not been a review of the building plans, like including the height, right? Am I understanding that correctly? So if they wanna build this building, they still have to go in and bring in a set of plans and get a permit, and that's when the height review would be done. Is that correct?
The height review was done now. That's why
Okay.
you have the elevations in your packet
Okay.
through those pages.
Okay.
Previously, they had very similar, a site plan review, and it went and it was dormant for 4 or 5 years. And then, the last it was active was probably 2020. then they came back, and so each one of these times, it was a new staff member. So they've been, the applicant has been going through this 3 or 4 times with new staff every time. However, they did have to put in the elevations in this because we can't approve it for zoning without seeing what the elevation is. However, when they do bring the plans in, there will be a zoning check just to make sure that it matches what we did approve with this, and then it will go for the architectural review.
So have y'all already approved the plan with the height limit that's on here? I mean,
These
the 40-foot
elevations are what
elevation?
have been zoning approved.
And why is it being approved if it appears to be higher than the code allows?
So I think this is something we can take back with a question to the reviewers, but we've been assured that under the code as it stood when they are, to which they are vested to, that they meet requirements. We can absolutely take this one back. This can be a, we can, approve it tonight or whatever with the understanding that we confirm that that is correct. But we have been told, it's been in the legal and engineering hands for months.
How could
And I
Are they
think-
comparing it
I
to the
think- I think
residential
this all-
code instead of the commercial code?
That's
I think this all comes down to the fact that when they did the commercial code review, which I know all of us remember, that's fairly recently, I think these plans were probably approved with the
Well,
elevations before
before
they
that.
dropped it down to 30 feet.
They didn't drop it. It was already 30 feet.
It was already 30 feet.
Okay?
Yeah.
And how long can a site approval request sit on file and still be considered current?
That might be a
That's
legal
legal,
question.
I believe it is 2 years application. However, I think vesting, council, vesting is,
Well, it
Five?
states in 10195 that the site plan will expire as to the improvements not yet constructed within 3 years from the approval by the council. The council at its discretion may grant 1 or more extensions to such site plan expiration date.
I'm just trying to figure out how they got
I'm sorry,
vested
Council,
rights.
What are you
yeah,
reading
that's the
from?
vested rights portion.
Section 10195, site plan approval.
So what he's referring to is y'all's role with the site plan. However, I think Kevin's question is referring to the vested rights and how vested rights works and how long something can be active
Yeah, how did they get
and
vested?
how do they get a vested
How
right.
did they get a vested right in this project is my question. Is it by submitting a site plan for approval 4 years ago? Was that how it happened? I'm just curious.
They had to submit, it's the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove that they have vested rights under a certain code. And they submitted, many documents that were reviewed by legal and engineering, and what came out of that was they believe that they are vested from, at some point when they originally submitted, which was in, I don't know,
Yeah, I think
80s
it
or
vested,
90s.
it vested back with the plat, when the plat was first recorded for the property. And
So
then
it's shown on the plat.
it's shown on the plat the date that it began, that it was first active. And I am not 100% familiar with our full vested rights portion. It is a recent adoption. I think, believe it happened probably 1920.
What part?
The vested rights that we actually have in our
Portion of
code.
That's
Mhm.
more recent, yes.
So there's probably some note on the original plat, which probably goes back to the 1950s or something.
I believe it's the 80s, 85.
Yeah, this is a
85.
1985 plat.
And does the plat have a note for 40-foot tall buildings are allowed or something?
That wouldn't be on the plan.
It shouldn't be. That's why I'm curious about how they got vested rights. And I believe you that, you say the engineers and the legal say, and I'm just curious more than anything else, because I think your suggestion is fine to approve it subject to confirmation
Confirming.
that the height is okay, but I'd like to hear the story. At some point.
My comment would be that I'm also curious as to if they filed their plat before the vested rights statute went into effect, does the statute that's enacted later afford them rights that they didn't have when they filed the plat? But I think, I would like to suggest that we ask that these questions, this be brought back to us. We postpone action, that these questions be addressed and brought back to us at the next council meeting.
How anxious are these people to get their project done?
They're pretty anxious, but.
They don't have a building to submit yet, though, for a permit. Why are they anxious to get this? 'Cause
They've had this application in to us and have been working towards this approval since December.
December? 10 months?
So what is the delay been?
I don't have an answer for that.
Well, a lot of it was spent determining whether they had vested rights or not, and that was,
Yep.
a lot of it was on the part of, our side, because the last time it had been seen was many years ago, but everything I'm reading is about the plat filed in 1985, which seems to give them, the rights to certain, not all, but certain of the certain codes that existed in 1985, and I'm not sure the legal basis for why certain things are vested and certain things are not, but some things are and some are not. It's very, legal. We can try to pull as much background as we can and bring it back. I don't know how postponing or.
Well, so my understanding was that the council receives the report, and if there's no defect, then it's a pro forma approval. And presumptively, there's no defect with this site plan. This is an extra step that most councils don't take. It does show due diligence that the council is receiving these site plans and reviewing them. I would just say if there's going to be a postponement or a denial, you just need to give some reasoning for the denial or for the postponement for the applicant to understand. So there's some due process, and they understand the reasoning for the council delaying or not taking action.
Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. This brought back some memories. This is where South Peak was terminated for safety reasons. The city council, back in the 80s, if I remember right, completely shut off the access to Bee Cave Road from South Peak. And if I look at the situation where it is situated, there's a wooded area there. And I'm wondering, due process, if the neighbors, the houses right back there, have had any intimation that this has been revived, because they did come when the earlier plans, there was a lot of, not understanding what was going to come there,
Right.
type of thing. So it's maybe due diligence to inform if they haven't informed. That's a reason to postpone if legally we can. Because that was a very hot issue for those 2 or 3 homes right next to, well, they already have tall buildings. I mean, they're built out. That doesn't mean that we should not be informing them. That's my thought. We have all this stuff going on with the residential and commercial backing up to each other. So it's a cautionary note for what it's worth. Thank you.
Well, here is my concern. I don't have enough information to determine that the proposed improvements show compliance with all applicable city ordinances. I would like the information that's been produced by our consultants, and if it hasn't been reviewed by Charlie's firm, have it reviewed by Charlie's firm and then brought back to us. I would not be able to act on this tonight. And I'm looking back at what we are asked to approve, and it's that the site plan shows compliance with all applicable city ordinances, would not adversely affect the efficient flow of traffic, and whether it would create any obligation on the part of the city. It's the number one item that I need clarification on.
Okay.
And my suggestion would be, rather than sending it to Charlie's firm to review, just getting a more clear statement from the lawyers and engineers who have already reviewed this matter.
Sure.
That's what
As-
I'm saying,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'm assuming they have, I just don't
Yeah.
know
Well,
that.
if
And
they,
they've
if
already
they turned
reviewed it,
something
so.
in, but it wasn't in our packet, so we didn't have the
The
We can-
report.
opportunity to
Right.
review that.
We can pull the full, zoning review that addresses the different comments related to height and other things that are different in the current code than were at the time. We can do that.
So do we need a motion to table or postpone or?
As long as it comes back on the agenda is the main thing. If there's no vote, then you can readdress it on the next agenda.
Bring it back up next time.
Okay.
More.
Throw away the agenda, I mean, the motion that you have?
Yeah, we
Oh,
do
yeah.
have a motion, you're right, good point. So I will withdraw the
Could
motion.
withdraw. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We will make sure this comes back next month with full zoning review information and additional explanation from legal.
Oh, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
It is within 300 feet from a residential
It is.
district.
Sure it is. Yeah. Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else on agenda item number 14, we will move on to agenda item number 18. Discussion and possible action regarding nominations to the Travis County Board of Directors.
Okay, so we, this came to us pretty suddenly, and we didn't actually have time to put it on one agenda, open up the call for council members to appoint anyone, or if they had heard of anybody in the community who was interested in running. So we did not receive any names. We sent this out to the council last week to make sure if anybody knew of anything, so we could prepare a resolution. We did not receive anything, so at this time, we would just suggest no action unless there is a motion from here today to appoint somebody or to submit a name for a nomination.
Anybody have a name?
I looked at this, and we have so few votes that we're outvoted by the city of Austin and Travis County and several school districts. So the person I would nominate is the nominee for the city of Austin. So I'm good.
Yeah, I found it interesting that how is Johnson City ISD in? Is that in, maybe they have a little
They might have a
Pete that's in
corner,
Travis
yeah.
County or something, cause I didn't think that was Travis County, so. Anyway, okay, then we will take no action on number 18. And move on to agenda item number 19. Discussion and possible action to cast a ballot for the election of the Region 10 Director of the TML Board of Directors.
So we received this ballot in the mail. There is one opening on the Region 10 board for TML, which is the spot that does represent this location. In the one sheet that we provided, I kind of walked through things we would consider when selecting a TML director, track record and incumbency. Basically, if the organization we believe is doing well and is serving our needs, then track record and incumbency should be considered. Representation from similar communities, a city that looks like Rollingwood and would provide good representation for us on the board, as well as any qualifications of a candidate or personal knowledge or experience with them. I personally did not have, none of them are incumbents, so the track record and incumbency is out. Did not have any personal experience with them, and so I have recommended here that we go with Jimmy Jenkins, council member of Smithville, only because that is the smallest city on the list, so likely would represent smaller cities maybe better than a larger city. But again, I have no personal knowledge of that or any I'm not dying on that hill. I just was going to give a recommendation, and so that is what is before you. But definitely open to more discussion, and we can talk about it.
Anybody else? Rick?
I had a call from a resident, Amy Patillo, who has worked with Dr. Christopher Harvey, the mayor in Manor, and recommended him. And then I independently Googled him and Mr. Jenkins and Ms. Thompson, and I would recommend that we go with Dr. Harvey, who is the mayor of Manor, has done a lot of work for Region 10 already, and has been mayor since 2021, and seems to be a good candidate for this position. I've also met Ms. Thompson at a women's elected, Travis County elected women's conference, and could also go with her. So my recommendation would be we go with Dr. Harvey.
Yeah, I looked over the little bios too, and my concern with Mr. Jenkins was that he's only been on the council since 2023, so he has very little city experience. And so while the size of Smithville may be closer to Rollingwood than the others, it's also much farther away and a much more rural location than Austin, which is right in the middle of, than Rollingwood, which is right in the middle of everything. And I would agree that that Dr. Harvey probably is a more I don't know what the right word is. I would be more comfortable with him based on his experience. So we have a motion?
I would move that we nominate, is this a nomination or this is a?
This is an actual
That we
election.
vote,
Just a ballot.
that I would move that we vote for Dr. Harvey for the Director 10 position in Region 10 of Texas Municipal League.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. 5 ayes, no nays. We have elected Dr. Harvey. We are casting our vote for Dr. Harvey. All right. Agenda item number 20. Discussion and possible action to cast a ballot for the election of places 11 to 14 on the Board of Trustees for the Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool.
Yes, so the TML intergovernmental risk pool is where the city gets, where Rollingwood gets all of our insurances, vehicle, property liability. We are personally very happy with the service they provide. They do provide services to most cities in Texas. They have quite a large reach. And from all of our experience, the organization is doing well, has done right by cities in many different ways over the last 5 years. So we are, based on that, we are recommending to go with the incumbents that have been serving in the positions previously. That would be place 11 is Randy Criswell, place 12, Allison Hayward, place 13, Harlan Jefferson, and place 14, Mike Land. That would be our recommendation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Brooke, second by Phil. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, 5 ayes, no nays. Motion passes as proposed. All right, agenda item number 21. Update and discussion regarding CRCRC proposals, including residential building height and residential landscape and tree canopy management. Kevin.
So I brought this forward after the last discussion around trees, we were looking at the ordinance where it had a fine not to exceed $500, and then an additional if it was done intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or criminally negligent, to go to 2,000. I suspected that the $2,000 limit was by Texas state law, and so that was researched, and that is the case. And so we have some language that basically takes the fine should it be adopted. We're not going to adopt anything tonight. This is just for discussion purposes. But I would think as a very minor change, just looking to strike the lower limit might be prudent, and put it up to the $2,000 fine for the offense. In addition, just once again, for sake of discussion, we are allowed to charge, the city's allowed to charge permitting fees for removal of trees. So that too might be an additional thing that gets looked at. And if trees are removed without permit, and then we would institute a fine, not only would the fine be instituted, but also the permitting fee that would have been necessary would also be levied against a person taking out that kind of a tree. I think from talking to the constituency that we believe trees are very important. And I personally believe that oftentimes developers who are just looking to maximize their profit don't take that into consideration enough, and will, if allowed, just kind of clear cut a lot, because it makes it a lot easier for them to develop. So as we all know, trees take a very long time to grow here, and we're called rolling wood for a reason. So I think we need to do everything we can to protect our trees, particularly in the setbacks between properties, to maintain the privacy and the quality of life in between different residential buildings. So I'll get off my soapbox with that.
I liked that tree ordinance you guys came up with. I thought that was really well done. I've been studying it and thought it was good. It seems really well balanced too. It's like probably doesn't go as far as I would go if it was just me, but I do think that it's strikes a good balance.
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. Just so you know, on the agenda for the next CRC meeting, we have a recommendation to City Council to apply a fee for the removal of trees, yet to define, but of $20,000. And we would at least apply that to heritage trees, and I don't know whether it would
How
be all
much?
protected. $20,000
I don't think we can do that.
for a fee for removal,
Oh.
not a penalty.
Oh.
I was actually hoping that I would have gotten here in time for agenda item number 5 here, but I guess you
Yeah,
guys
it's
were
a
moving like
permitting
a speeding
fee.
bullet today. So, but that's just, you'll see this again next month is what I'm saying. That we'll be voting on it here next Thursday, and I expect
And
that
that's
it'll go.
permit to remove what size tree?
Well, that has to be discussed, but at the very least, a heritage tree, 24 inches at 4.5 feet.
Okay, because they can't be removed under your proposed ordinance unless they're inside the building footprint.
That's right.
And so it would be, if you're gonna cut one down in the building footprint, you still gotta pay a bunch to give them an incentive to design around it, right?
That is correct, Councilman.
Okay. That's clever. I don't know if they'll let you do it, but it's.
We can make it more if you like. We can recommend it higher.
I don't know that we can, because it may be that fees are required to be like proportional to the amount of, city staff and resources spent going through the approval process.
I would have to confirm, but I remember previous discussions with the planner that we used to work with, that he said it was not uncommon to put pretty high fees on things like this, and the city could use it towards a tree replacement fund. So if that's something that we're interested in, so I think we can. I would have to double check and make sure with legal that if there wasn't some rule about how if it's, I don't know, unreasonable or more than the like you said, like the cost to administer it. But I think it's possible.
Could charge $50,000 for pickleball permits if we wanted to, and
There
then
you
we wouldn't be banning pickleball. We're just saying you have to pay a fee to get a permit. So I'm just concerned that from legal that we find out whether fees, may be considered to be punitive or prohibitive in nature. I don't know. I think it's a good idea and I like it. I'm just think before we get too far with it, we might want to figure out whether that's going to be legal.
Okay, we can do that.
I promise you'll be discussing this again.
Okay.
Also, just as sake of discussion, the 24 inches on heritage trees there are very few trees that have a trunk width of 24 inches. I personally think that, there might need to be a smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last
As
time
well.
it came up, it was 19 inches.
Yeah, and I've,
a formula for triple trees and stuff too to get to a heritage tree.
I saw that.
Oh, okay.
But
For the
they're-
live oaks that share a root system, that makes sense.
But still, your committee told us there are only, I think, was it 5 or 12? They went around
I
and
thought it was 12 or 15
12
or something.
went around
not
the
very
city and
many.
looked. It wasn't a lot, but I also agree with you. I've seen other cities. I think it's 20 inches maybe in Westlake Hills, and then others, do circumference instead of diameter. This is a diameter rule, but it's just
It's
math.
the same thing.
Well, as I'm saying, you convert it though, and you get different. Like when you try to compare them, it might have been Westlake Hills that I was looking at that had a circumference, and when I compared it, it came down to like 19 or 20 inches. So I've seen a lot of cities that have a little bit smaller threshold for heritage. I think I agree. I'm just trying to say I agree with your
Appreciate
point
it.
on
I
it.
promise we'll bring something back, a recommendation that you'll like.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. And that was trees, but we've also got heights on the, of course, you're the pro tem, you
Well, I don't,
can guide us.
there was no information in the packet on anything other than the trees, so.
Okay, well, I had asked for heights to be put on for discussion too.
It's there.
And really, I just wanted to keep it on so that we can just keep talking about it at every meeting until we get something done, because it's been a long, slow process, and I don't want it to fall off the agenda ever. It's been 2.5 years we've been working on this, long before I was elected to council. And when I got elected to council, I wanted to do something like in the first 30 days, which I was so naive to think could happen. But here we are 2 years later, and you guys have done a lot of great work on it. I'd love to hear where we're at right now.
Okay, with the joint meeting that we had with Dave Bench, One Randolph, with the joint meeting that we had with CRCRC, Planning and Zoning and City Council, a lot of lively discussion came out, and within that discussion, maybe new discoveries as to what would be acceptable to the public in terms of compromise and so on. And so we took that on as a cue to go back and at least have one more look at what we were proposing. And we had intended to do that the last CRC meeting, but a key participant of the CRCRC was unfortunately ill, and she could not make that. Now, we have it definitely on the schedule. What we did do is at that CRCRC meeting, we had committed to finalizing the height ordinance recommendation at this coming meeting. So what we do at this coming meeting should hopefully finalize everything we're doing. It changes a little bit, with lighting conditions and so on. But it's we're almost there, and I've had some discussion even today with one of the CRC members as to what a tweak might look like here or there, and some of that's around the tenning piece. So, at any rate, I promise you, we're almost there.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
all your work, and
Yep.
thank your committee for all their work.
Yeah.
I'll take that message back.
All right, anything else? All right, that was not posted for action, so moving on to agenda item number 22, discussion regarding non-affixed accessory buildings such as playhouses and storage sheds, permitting and required yards.
Okay, so I asked for this item because there was a resident that wrote a letter about a playhouse, and there was basically some concern that the city was trying to apply building codes to a playhouse, and they thought that was kind of a government overreach. And I understand by the time I contacted Ashley to get it on the agenda that the city had reached a determination that the playhouse was not subject to building code because it was not permanently affixed to the ground, is my understanding. And that brought up the consideration of, well, there are other accessory structures too, such as garden sheds that are also not affixed to the ground and are not subject to code. And one of the questions that comes up when you start talking about them not being subject to code is, should there be any regulation of them, any height limit, any are they allowed to be put in setbacks, and is that a problem? You know, and it's just something we haven't addressed before, but since this issue came up, I thought we should talk about it.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody last night at the National Night Out who has reviewed this and disagrees with the assessment that they are not regulated. So I have not gotten any of the write-up, and I will try and get that from them, but they had indicated that there are a number of conflicts in our code where things are not necessarily compatible in the various pieces that might relate to this. But to me, the issue that brought this up is that this is a 2-story playhouse that is like 5 feet from the property line and looks right into the neighbor's window. Which, whether it needs to be permitted or not is one question. The other thing is whether or not you can put that in the setback. So,
Can you take this to us?
I would like to have state comments.
Sure.
When I can be recognized.
go ahead.
I wrote this homeowner and asked for information, and he said, I should have sent you these details. And he also sent the code provisions that were being quoted to him. It's not just that it's a playhouse, you know, the code provisions include within the definition of accessory building a tool house, a home workshop, a greenhouse, a garage, a carport, a children's playhouse, and a swimming pool house. And then specific to accessory buildings, there's also a limit on the number of accessory buildings you can have, which his permit would also have to get clearance from some other requirements like no more than one accessory building on a lot. He's also got a gym on the lot that's an accessory building. An accessory building can't exceed more than 1 story in height. The playhouse is 2 stories. And then in this case, I went by and drove by it, and it's on a corner lot, but the playhouse, it's the corner of Pickwick and Wallace, and the playhouse faces, or the playhouse is in the side of the, on the street on Wallace, and is sited such that it's in advance of the house next door. You know, it's closer to the curb than the 30-foot setback on the house next door. And so it's not well suited for the neighbors. So I would recommend that we're not up for action tonight, but I think if we're going to, I don't think we're up for action tonight on this. No. But those were some of the concerns I have. It seems that if we're gonna address accessory building, I'd rather not have a motion or address playhouses alone, because that, you know,
Right.
I know there's another house near me that has a playhouse that's 2 stories off the ground, in the back of the home, but could also be, you know, a granny flat or a rental, or it's big enough that it could do that. I think we need to address it more comprehensively than just this one permit application. I would say that, you know, it seems to me that there's enough, that there are several hurdles this applicant would have to clear other than it just being a playhouse.
If I could just briefly kind of walk through the argument that they ended up making for why it did not qualify as an accessory building or structure. So the definition of an accessory building or structure, it starts with, it says an accessory building or structure means a building or a structure, and then it goes on to say, you know, whatever else about it. So that then takes us to the definition of building and the definition of structure. The definition of building in our code, the first thing that says is a structure which is permanently affixed to the land. And so this playhouse, according to the applicant, is not permanently affixed to the land, which would mean it does not fall under the building definition. And then a structure means anything constructed, the use of which requires a permanent location on the ground or attachment to something having a permanent location on the ground. And again, they're arguing that this playhouse is not permanently affixed to the ground, and thus it does not meet the definition of a structure. They're also arguing that it's not, the definition of building also includes is built for the enclosure or shelter or protection of persons. They're arguing that it doesn't do that either, so it also shouldn't fall under it. But I think the permanently affixed to the land is the part that is, you know, if it's not attached to the ground, then it doesn't appear to fall under a building or a structure. And so that is the argument for why it does not meet the definition of an accessory building or structure, and why it was, you know, why after we collected all the information they provided this evidence, it was determined that then it does not meet the definition of an accessory building or structure. If there's other, you know, code provisions that need to be looked at to determine, you know, whether or not this can, you know, permitting can apply to this, you know, we're happy to look at it.
Is it on skids, or how's it not permanently affixed to the ground? I can't imagine a 2-story playhouse that isn't
Yes,
anchored.
that's another
is gonna
issue.
Right.
blow.
Yeah, I was
That
just
is
about
that
to
is a-
bring that up as well, but I
Right.
think
That's
it's
a
on a
safety
platform right now.
It's not permanently.
I think it's on a platform
Really?
as well. I'm actually going
It's,
to
But
pull
I-
up.
maybe it's
But is it,
bolted and can be
is it-
undone, but I don't think that means.
it on a concrete slab?
No.
It's sitting on the ground?
It's
It is
sitting,
on-
it's sitting on a
It's
platform,
on, it looks like it's on a
constructed.
deck platform kind of
It's
thing.
a stone, raised platform.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's like a pool, you know, like you'd have a deck, a stone deck around your pool.
So it is
It's-
affixed to something that is affixed to the ground, or it's
They
set on
stated,
something.
they stated in the memo, it does not have a permanent location on the ground or attachment having a permanent location on the ground. While heavy, the playscape is movable, non-permanent. There's nothing anchoring it to the ground.
Do we
But
have
it has something underneath it, it's not just sitting on the dirt.
Correct.
Right.
And that to me,
But they say it's not anchored and therefore.
It's not
but-
anchored.
well, it
It
doesn't
could
Well,
be
but
like
that
on
doesn't
a-
brings
have to
up-
be anchored,
I
think
it
of-
says, or sitting on something that's anchored to the ground.
No, it has to be anchored to the thing that's anchored.
Yeah, otherwise a barbecue grill would be an accessory building or structure.
Well, and there are other types of things commonly like a tool shed, you know, that's a listed building that's, you wouldn't.
A
you
tool
would-
shed?
Yeah, it doesn't typically have a permanent foundation.
Right, and my neighbor has a tool shed that was actually encroaching a foot on my property when I bought the lot, and I brought it to their attention and said, also, it'd be nice if it wasn't in the setback. And they scooted it 6 inches off my property and said, well, we're allowed to have it in the setback, which is fine. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I can see how in some cases it would be more of a big deal having something sitting in the setback like that. It's in some circumstances. So I don't know. I'd love to see pictures of this thing.
Well, I also think that we've all, I sense that at least 3 of us, maybe 4 of us here, have sensed that having a 2-story structure that is not affixed to the ground, given our wind and everything else, and especially since it is so close to an adjoining neighbor's house, is probably a potential serious problem. Now, I understand perhaps our litigation liability attorney here might.
We have immunity, but my concern, oh, thank you so much.
It's not just
Why-
wind, it's also kids up on the second floor.
Well, yeah, I know.
I'd also-
And to say that it's not a structure because it's not protecting,
That's
Well,
nonsense.
It's got a
that's
roof.
nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd also like to just draw, so we are definitely, we're not posted to talk about a specific structure today. This is, more in general, so
Well,
of course we
generally.
can keep, using that one as a discussion, just pointing that. that's
But
all.
also I think it would be nice to have, like, not subject every garden shed or playhouse to the full building code. So it'd be nice to recognize that people ought to be able to do things as long as they are of a certain size and maybe not in the setbacks. I don't know.
Mhm.
And not looking into the neighbor's window.
Yeah.
I can understand it bothers some people.
Well-
The problem is here that it's, if it's in a side setback that sticks out further and, like toward a street, more than the houses do, then it's kind of like out in the yard, which I could see being a little more bothersome to people. But you're right, on like in setbacks in people's backyards, if it's next to a side setback and there's a fence there and you don't see it, so what? Who cares? But if it's sticking up 6 feet over the fence and it's, huh?
I actually have one of those
You
too.
have one of those next to you?
But it's a playhouse, and I know that the kids aren't going to be in it for very long, and they're going to get tired of it in about a
Right,
year and
yeah.
not be in it. So.
So,
At least that's what my kids are like. Although they use theirs, we have one because we have one that's probably like I saw that picture. I had to go see this how tall it is. Ours probably could be that tall. I mean, you
Really?
could call it we put in a 2-story. I mean, but
is it affixed to the ground?
no, it's not affixed to the ground. It's heavy. It'd be hard to move. I mean, I'd have to tear the thing down to move
Right.
it, but it's not technically affixed to the ground.
How did you make it heavy to where it won't tip over? Concrete?
Just the weight of the material.
Really?
Is just that heavy.
It's that heavy?
Yeah.
Well, and then structure isn't, it's something constructed, the use of which requires a permanent location on the ground. But it's not affixed. It's just a location on the ground. So I think it would be a structure. It's not a floating playhouse.
Right.
It does
Yep.
say a permanent location on the ground, so I mean, I don't know. We
But
can run
affixed
that.
is not there,
Sure.
It sits on the ground, or
Right,
it
but if it
sits
has
on the.
something that it is sitting on that
Yeah.
is underneath it, that is something that is
We can.
installed and has a permanent location on the ground.
Yeah.
Right, so,
Earth sits on a giant turtle.
Attachment to something sitting on the ground.
right.
Turtles
Yes,
all
sir.
the way down.
Dave Bench, One Randolph. I think y'all need to be cautious about all this. If it were a swing set instead of a playhouse, would that matter? They are anchored to the ground, generally considered to be something that is not permanent, generally going away as the kids grow up. And would such a thing, like a swing set or maybe a set of monkey bars or something like that, be allowed in the setback? You know, this is a playhouse, swing set, monkey bars, we're kind of in the same realm. And I think what needs to happen, if anything, is we need better definition in the code as to what's permitted uses. I'm offering our services here, but recognizing that if we get involved,
Which
the
hat
resident who
Which
is-
hat are you wearing, Dave?
yeah, there you go. I'm in the CRC right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I'll tell you, sometimes I'm confused. If we get involved in it, then the resident who is asking for this to happen is probably going to be waiting a while.
Well, right now, they've got their structure, and apparently the city's told them that they don't need to, that they're not in any violation. That it's not subject to the
Doesn't
code.
permitting, right.
It does look like the construction has been halted.
Right, they had, at the time we told them, wait, you need to submit stuff so we know at least, you know, what you're doing and we can analyze it. They did halt it. You know, we can run this one back up to legal and decide if that structure technically does or doesn't, the definition of that does or does not require it to be, you know, permanently affixed. However, I think what we need to know here tonight are there code changes you all would like to see that we can, you know, begin trying to put together? Are there things you do or do not want allowed or in setbacks or heights that maybe would not fall under a building or structure? Or if we need to start working in that direction.
And I guess my question is there really a problem that we're trying to solve? Is that playhouse such a big problem that we shouldn't let people do that sort of thing? You know, does it offend the neighbors? Does it impact the neighbors unfairly? And it's really kind of what I'm asking. And I don't know.
I'll say the city has not heard anything from, at least the neighbor. We haven't received anything from any immediately adjoining neighbors at this time.
I mean, if somebody does something annoying, we can always go talk to them and ask them to not be annoying.
Well, the problem we still have is we don't know if they're in compliance with the other limits in the code. You know, we can't act either way on this, the way it's presented tonight. And I think what the code seems to be trying to do is to limit the number of accessory buildings so that you don't, you know, have more than one and limit the, I'm a little concerned because the way it's drafted, you can put an accessory building only in the setback. And I don't think that was what was intended.
How interesting.
An accessory building may be located only in a rear yard or in a side yard that does not border a street. Does this border, this is we don't know if this building's in the side yard or the that borders or the rear yard, but,
think it's the
you
rear,
know, there's a lot we don't know about this that I think needs further review by permitting.
Well,
And I think if we're going to address accessory structures more globally, I would think that should start with planning and zoning. I know they've talked about it before, several years ago, and I think this ordinance in its current form is 3 or 4 years old. So maybe we need to tweak the attachment to the ground, but
I think we need to clarify this because Children's Playhouse is listed under the list of things that are accessory buildings.
yes, I know.
And so you can't say that that is an accessory building and then say, but it doesn't meet the definition
But
of
it's not.
accessory building. You know, I mean, it's,
Right.
We might want to do away with this attached to the ground threshold, because we're encouraging people to build things that are not attached to the ground, that are dangerous.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so we shouldn't have that incentive built into the code.
right.
Right. We
You
just
know, and
need to
it's-
clarify what our intentions are and make sure that our code is not in conflict with itself.
But also, I don't think it should be that difficult to get a garden shed or a playhouse in your backyard. I mean, we don't want
Yeah.
to turn that into a big
A big deal.
process.
I agree. I think a big problem is the height issue
Right.
with something like this, and the fact of, it's over a fence, a typical fence height,
And very close to the fence.
and looking into a neighbor's window, so.
Next thing you know, people will be building playhouses for their mother-in-laws in
Exactly.
the backyard.
Well, that's exactly it.
Or their tenant.
But I'm confused. In this case, did the neighbor complain about this or not?
But, you know, it's,
That's
I'm
just-
just wondering
we have
how
a
we
code
know that
for a
it looks in
reason.
the-
We have a
I-
code for a
I
reason.
know, but I just want to know in this particular case, how do we know that it's looking into their window? Did the
'Cause you
neighbor say
can-
that?
You can
Drive
see
by
that
and
from the
see it from the
street.
street.
Oh, so we look from the street, okay.
How did this issue all come up? Code, just drove by and saw it?
I'll say I actually drove by first and saw them building it, and I called Nikki and said, "Hey, do we know what they're doing over there?" And we didn't, so we just said we'll take a look into it. And then after that, we got a couple other people called in about it who had walked by or driven by, so
Were
it just got
curious.
brought up. And it, and kind of regardless, I mean, we would have asked anything being built, we would say you at least need to tell us what you're doing first, so we can determine whether you are or aren't. You don't do or don't fall under the code. And then at first we said we think you're an accessory building, so we think you can't do it. And then they came back with, we don't believe we're a building or a structure. The building official determined that they weren't, but again, we can always review that, or anyone can challenge that determination.
Who in particular was the building official? Nikki?
We-
Okay.
Yes,
I would take another look at the structure definition. 'cause
we will, and
yeah.
we'll definitely run that through legal. But if we determine it doesn't meet those, we don't even get to 10777 determining what can or can't be done with an accessory building, which is how it was presented to us, and that was the evidence. So again, we'll review it, but I think we do want to know in the end what is the desired outcome, so we can clarify the code.
A number of years ago, I was on jury duty with a case. It was a First Amendment argument for somebody that put up a nativity scene on the Capitol grounds, and whether or not the little stable building was a structure or not. Which at the time I said, it's absolutely a structure. It has walls and a roof. It's a structure. Just,
Yeah.
common
Yeah.
Yeah.
understanding of what is a structure. And we did not have a verdict because we had a mistrial, because Court TV talked to jurors before we had a verdict. But anyway, that was the whole issue, is whether or not that was a structure, and if they had been improperly cited and made to remove it because they didn't have a permit for putting a structure on the Capitol grounds.
So here we've got defined terms, structure's a defined term. And I think we ought to send it to CRCRC or P&Z, whichever's more appropriate to start with, and with the goals of being that we not overly burden homeowners who want to have a garden shed or a playhouse, but also consider whether there ought to be any regulation at all of these structures, and if so, what?
Garden shed doesn't usually have windows that look over the fence, so.
I'd be in favor of P&Z looking at it. I think CRCRC was kind of developed for one purpose initially, and now keep adding more and more things to it. It seems like it's kind of drifting from its core mission, I guess, initially. So I would say, yeah, have P&Z take a look. Get some feedback.
All right. Are we done with that one?
I think so.
All right, you're passing that on to P and Z? Okay. That brings us to agenda item number 23. Update and discussion on the Park Commission tree proposal, trail discussion, and possible funding by RCDC.
And I asked for this to be put on here too. You know, we talked about the Park Commission tree proposal, which I think has got broad support here on council for them to do that tree project. And I suggested that, you know, they seek CR or RCDC funding for that project. And I guess I just wanted to, you know, see that we're gonna keep that project moving forward, maybe get some direction from council about presenting that to the RCDC and requesting funding for the project from them if council supports us doing that. You know, maybe get a budget number that they would approve up to, and so that we can keep that project going forward.
Go ahead.
I would concur, and the other thing I've heard is that a lot of people think that this would be a project for which donations would be given. And so part of the, well, I would say I think this would be a perfect project for our RCDC liaisons to take to RCDC.
Well, I'd like to, and I just didn't want to do
Yeah.
that without council giving at least a
Yeah.
nod that we should, you know,
In the-
go
in
that
the-
direction.
And I think, you know, this calls for a number of trees. I don't know if it can be phased, you know, if there's logic, if RCDC doesn't want to do, you know, do it in one fell swoop, then, or 1 year's budget, then it could be phased, or parts of it could be, there could be a solicitation for donations. And I've looked online, and I've heard other people say, you know, there are types of memorials that are one central plaque that says, you know, something to the effect of these trees were funded in part by donations in memory of, and then you list all names. You know, that could be, people don't want plaques on every tree, but
Yeah,
you
it
know.
seems like council's been resistant to turning the park into a memorial
yes.
park, which I agree with that sentiment that we don't necessarily need a lot of that. And especially if RCDC's got $600,000 and they have expressed willingness to spend money on capital improvements in the park. I know the one they approved more than a year ago, we haven't gotten done yet, but we will eventually get it done. And then that means we're already into the next budget year for RCDC, and they've already committed that they would spend a certain amount of their funds coming in every year, $50,000, which would cover this whole project.
Okay.
And I'd like to get them to just budget for the $50,000, and then let, you know, the city's got to go out and get bids, and let the city see what kind of bid we can get within that range, and get the project going.
yeah, I would
So,
agree.
If that, everyone agrees, I don't think that's an action item, but I just wanted to get some consensus before running off to RCDC and saying this is what we want. So,
We also have the Women's Club that makes a donation to the city every year, and they are looking for projects to fund or,
Mhm.
how about a
So-
garden bench?
Well,
Well,
we have
There's-
lots of
I've
other
also,
benches.
I've also heard interest in looking at improving the playground equipment in the lower park, which I think would also be a capital
yeah,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's I think it's good for the Parks Commission to keep looking for capital projects that we could get RCDC to fund as much money as they've
Yes.
got. And I realize not everybody on RCDC agrees with that, but there's, seems to be building consensus, and you know, if we've got a good project like this tree project, let's ask for it, let's get it in the pipeline, and then we can take the next one to them and see if we can get any more. So we'll just take it one step at a time.
Well, and while we're on this topic, I did, when the commercial code revisions were approved, I sent a note to Colin Harvey on RCDC to ask if he would like a presentation on what the code changes were, that they might be able to then talk up with commercial developers? And he said yes. And Tom Farrell and I are to be scheduled for the next RCDC meeting just to give a brief overview of what those changes are. So they hear it in one place in one time and
That's great.
That'd be great.
have an outline.
Good work.
All right. Anything else on that one?
On that agenda item, the other thing is just an update from Ashley on the progress of the 2 engineering firms that are studying our retaining wall.
That's
24.
not.
Yeah, that's.
Is that not on there?
Our very next
That's
item.
next
Oh,
item.
I'm
So
sorry.
We'll get there.
23.
I apologize.
Are we done with 23?
I have to read it. Yep, it looks like, oh, the trail discussion, yeah, I think we're done. I don't think we have to talk about the trail right now.
Okay. Sure.
Seems like today is a good time to bring this up for your attention. Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. This issue has been on my radar for quite some time. So when we talk about the code, well, what do you call it? When the Optimist Club sold the land, 8.93 acres, or 9.3. Anyway, when they sold the land, they also had some deed restrictions. This is a copy of the. So the one sentence or one paragraph that people always go back to in the deed restriction is, it's in the second one, where it is deed restricted for playing, for kids to play,
Youth sports.
right? The paragraph before that is totally ignored. And here's what it says. It says to ham and to hold property, all of that legal language. And then it says that this conveyance is made subject to the perpetual roadway easement received by deed recorded in volume 2986, page 1078, deed records of Travis County, Texas, to the extent that the same remains in existence and is applicable to the property. I've talked to some friends who are lawyers, and this area is the roadway where you have people come into the park and park along the side, which borders the fence that is the property line between the Western Hills Little League and our property.
Yep.
And
The pool.
and the pool property, Western Hills, I'm sorry.
Athletic club.
Athletic Club, WHAC, and our property. I'm not sure whether who has looked into it, but I would really, I've been carrying this around me for a while to bring it up at an appropriate time, but there's never an appropriate time. When the Milk and Cookies building was approved, guess what? It was going to be located right in that spot, which is a permanent roadway easement. I don't know if anybody looked into it at that time, but it was brought up to me by a legal mind who said, how could they do that? And then Brian Ryder did some research, because there was all this talk about the bump or the hump or whatever that is, where some of that property that is shown on the WAC plat appears to be, there is a small area that is projecting, and they said that is part of their property plat. No, they researched it, Brian Ryder did, and that was already, it's in our deed. And I have all that information also, where the page number and all of that is there. So it's something that we, the city, should make sure that it never ever comes up that something is permanently put there which was deeded as a roadway. I don't know who the person is who has to do that, but I feel trepidation that somebody just comes and says, oh yeah, that's great. We'll put the building, you can sell cookies on one side to the pool and sell cookies to the park on the other side. That's when this really came up as who approved that building to go there. We almost came this close. The next day, if it was not a tie vote, they would have come and cleared the land to put that building, 1,000 square feet. It's very scary to think that we didn't do our research, whoever it was, to know that this is the deed restriction and it says permanent road. I think at some point that was the roadway that would have connected Pleasant Drive to the Rollingwood Drive. But forget the fact that there was a deep ditch there, but there was also a quarry there which created the ditch. And we had those two properties on Pleasant that the city had the right of first refusal to buy or not buy. Lack of money back in the day, we said no. And then, of course, two homes came up there. But the roadway is permanently described in the deed record. And that's something we need to make sure, whether it's trees that are going to be planted or some structure. I mean, as long as it's treated as a roadway, it's okay, I think.
Shanti, I can tell you, I'm a lawyer and a
Okay.
real estate developer, and I just bought a piece of property last month that's got probably a dozen easements across it, most of which are abandoned easements. They're like a lot of old utility easements, but old easements, that are even if it's permanently dedicated, if it's our city property, nobody. We're the only ones that have a right to use it as a road or not use it as a road if we don't want to. So we don't have to use it as a road. We can plant trees where we want to, even if there's an easement there. It's just not a legal prohibition, in my opinion, for us to do anything with it just because it has been previously dedicated.
I am not a legal.
I understand.
But to me, that language speaks of a code dedicated restriction for perpetuity, that it should be a permanently a roadway. Again, legal minds can do the.
And it's not an actual legal enforceable dedication if it doesn't have a deed, a legal description in it. For example, of the easement width and location, like a surveyed legal description. Then it's not really enforceable. And if it's dedicated as a road, it's dedicated to the city. So it means the city has the right. Like we can abandon easements if we want to, and we can. Enforce them or not enforce them.
I'm looking at all of this stuff where it says 25 feet roadway easement, okay?
Right.
And I'm happy for it to be a roadway easement.
Sure.
I'm not contesting that.
No, I
I'm
understand.
only trying to bring it to your attention.
Sure.
There are a lot of legal minds here, including our legal counsel, that when we go forward with anything, like a building to be constructed on that property, on that easement, I think we have to be very cautious about that. First of all, for safety reasons, where we know already when cars are parked, an emergency vehicle can just not go in and come
I'm
out.
sure you're
There's so many
concerned.
other reasons.
I'm sure you're concerned about that, and that has, in my opinion, that's just terrible parking lot design. We've got a badly designed parking lot, and we do need to do something about it at some point. In my opinion, I don't think it's safe. I agree with you.
I rest my case,
Sure.
as a lawyer would say. I just, as a concerned citizen, I wanted to bring it up to all of you. And so going forward, maybe the city can put that in as a cautionary tale before you allow, or almost allow, 1,000 square feet building to have been put there for so many reasons.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that. I mean, I would love to, if we could figure out a way to, basically permanently never allow anything there, but I just kind of wonder, next people to come in or down the line, the city can kind of do what it wants to do is what I'm concerned. I would love to figure out a way to do that, though, because I share your concern on that as well. But, yeah.
Well,
I need
if
smarter,
there's
I need smarter people.
any
than me.
way that
figure
we
that out.
can designate it, like we designate a green belt or we designate easements, that was the founding, the concept back in the day. And we talk about the restrictive covenant of allowing only kids from an in-school district to play there. This is a restrictive covenant in my mind, simplistically saying. So you guys decide. I don't want to take up your time, but I appreciate your giving me this opportunity because I've been carrying this around for several years, trying to find the right time to bring it up. It's not about trees, okay? It's more
I
about,
understand,
yeah.
and I share your concern and Alex's concern about, you know, preserving the park and keeping anybody from building things, but I think Alex's right that our hands are tied in a way because we can't bind future councils on what they might do, except citizens just have to show up and vote. Make sure they're voting for people who will preserve the park, so.
Okay, we are way off our agenda item here. So, are we done with 23 now?
I think so.
All right. Agenda item number 24, update and discussion on the status of the Upper Park retaining wall and contracting.
So it's been a few months since it came to council. The city council had approved a proposal from IWS to design the retaining wall as well as the retention or detention pond. I never remember which one on Nixon. Detention pond at Nixon and Gentry. Those proposals, once reviewed here, there was discussion that they needed more information and to be reviewed by our city engineers and more detail to be added to those. So those have been, at least the I guess both of them have been going back and forth between IWS and our engineers, back and forth multiple times. At the current moment, it's in our engineers' court to tell them if their most current draft is what, you know, is detailed enough and has as much information as it should. From that council meeting, though, our direction was once we got that where our engineer was okay with it, that we would then go out and get bids and bring back bids based on those engineering drawings. And so at this time, we are hoping that by the next council meeting, we will have an approved by our engineers design that we can go out and get bids for and bring those back at our next council meeting, at least for the retaining wall.
Okay,
That's where we're at.
appreciate the update, and I guess it's a race to see whether the copyright application or the retaining wall will get across the finish line first.
That's
I thought we got rejected on that.
good point. Yeah, we did.
Oh, we
Though-
got totally rejected.
I think so.
Well, we can amend our application.
Oh, they
So
didn't like our
yes,
app. Okay.
right. And we
So
will.
are we working on the amendment?
We are.
All right, is that all for 24? Hearing nothing, I assume that's a yes. Agenda item number 25, update and discussion regarding vegetation maintenance on corners and site distances.
And I put this on the agenda, and I've put this on the agenda several times over the last 2 years, or at least 2 or 3 times. And it's because, you know, Rollingwood is difficult place to drive. I mean, we mentioned the curves and such, and the hills, of course, create problems. But then we have very heavy vegetation on some corners. It's improved in some places, like at Ashworth and Hatley. I know the city has made efforts to contact homeowners and let them know that there are some site distance obstructions. Our ordinance says that that a homeowner is responsible to keep vegetation clear from a point at which the streets intersect 15 feet back and no higher than 3 feet, which is great. That isn't even adequate on some places where you're kind of coming up a hill or the grade goes up on the corner and you can still, it doesn't help. But nonetheless, I still see people like have planted new plantings right there on the corner of some, like Weesatch, around the corner of Rollingwood and Inwood, I believe. It's brand new plantings right there that in the corner that are going to obstruct site distances. And so I don't know. I know that the city doesn't want to be heavy-handed on enforcement on this stuff and go in and start just whacking people's landscaping without giving them a chance to deal with it themselves. But I would just encourage the city to be aware of it, and to the extent we're doing codes enforcement, be aware of it and notify homeowners about problem intersections. And wag your finger at them.
You hear that, Chief? Wag the finger. Maybe the taser.
But I would, remind them of their obligation. It is the law, and they do have, potential civil liability if somebody gets hurt in an accident because their vegetation obstructed the site distances.
One more comment from that. Shanti Jayakumar, 3209 Park Hills Drive. So, my dear friend Flo Macklin, who passed away at the age of 93, I'm always reminded of her on this specific topic because she would come to council meeting after council meeting in her 90s, in her late 80s, and she would talk about the same thing. And so finally she said, if y'all don't do anything about it, I'm going to get a friend. I'm going to sit in the back of the truck and go to the corner and chop off the part that is in the line of, yeah, because it makes it hard on our police and everybody. I know exactly what you're saying. So it's a safety issue when the line of sight is obstructed by, especially on corners and where there's a blind corner. And so that was her rudimentary citizen, what do you call, action committee
Vigilante
of one.
response.
Yeah, just do that, yeah. Just want to tell you. And before you call for adjournment, and I know this is not on this topic, but this time there's no update on our update on. It was not on the council, agenda, so I
Right.
didn't know why.
Right, well, we're amending the application right now, so we'll have an update soon. But I'm not sure how long, once we resubmit, how long it will take, but we will continue to bug them every month until they
I thought we were number 14 or 15 or something, no?
It got
I think one of the
rejected.
meetings
we were
you
rejected.
Last meeting.
We were rejected?
I'll say, I know this
Oh,
is not on the agenda,
sorry.
but I have some good clarification for this. So what they used to do is before you would submit an application, they would have a pre-submittal conference with you, and they would tell you what to put on the application so it passed. They don't do that anymore. Now afterwards, they give you a letter that says, here's all the things that we recommend you put on the application so it will pass this time. And that's what they did this
That
time to
seems
us.
highly inefficient.
Agreed. But we have now a document. I have to hunt for multiple pictures of where every place our logo has been used in the last 5 years, and that's what I'm working on, is collecting all that documentation so we can prove that it's real. But we will get it resubmitted. But they have changed their process, so apparently they all get rejected. So I just maybe throw that out there. It's not just us, Yeah, I know. We got rejected after all of that. So, anyways. I know it's not on
So
the
there's
agenda.
no help from We and Company? Because they were the ones who approved the design?
It was not part of their contract, no, and they're no longer, we don't work with them, at least in this capacity. They've worked a little bit with us for CRCRC.
But it's like a continuing,
Right, I don't,
okay,
I
I know
don't
it's
that
not on the
it's-
agenda,
yeah.
but I'll talk to you separately.
Okay.
So, before we adjourn, I'm just curious as to why we as a city can't be more heavy-handed and take this safety concern and actually whack that. Yes, talk to the people, give them the opportunity, but much in the same way as we trim the other trees, we said, you either do it or it's gonna be done. It's a serious safety concern, these sightlines
I
and
know that I
corners.
got a letter like, hey, cut these back, we're coming through, and I saw the crews coming through. I thought that's what they were doing. But is that not what they're
That-
They were
Well,
just
that
doing
was,
trees.
that was for height at the canopy.
Trucks, like your
But-
Amazon trucks not hitting a tree branch.
I think, just to speak to our current approach, so there are many corners that have vegetation that, because of, topographic changes, are or are not an issue from an actual visibility standpoint. So we've never gone through to every single corner and said, if this doesn't meet the code, we're gonna leave you something on your door that says that we're gonna take care of it if you don't. If it's brought up as that this is a site visibility problem, and I think arguably we could do a better job of just driving around ourselves and determining where the site visibility issues are, but we never want to appear that we're enforcing it on some people and not others, though it may not even cause an issue because there's not, height changes and things like that cause the problem. So, please let us know about any that are specific hazards. We'll do a better job of that. And usually people cooperate with us, or they're happy to let us do it, one of the two. So we're okay with doing that as well.
We'll text you intersections.
There you go. Send me a screenshot and
All right.
I'll take care of it.
Well,
Well, and
somebody
it's
will.
not just vegetation, though. From a site clearance standpoint, it's also signs
right,
that get put up where they
right.
aren't supposed to, and in a size that's way out of legal limits. It's construction fences that are not placed far enough back. I mean, we've got
Yep.
lots of things, so before we go cutting down people's, Pride of Barbados or whatever that's growing up and looking pretty, we need to make sure that we're enforcing the sign and the construction fence issues also, which to me are an even more egregious safety issue because they block a lot more.
And we amended that
Visibility.
construction fence, that was
We
your
did.
item
Yep.
to amend it, and I think
But they're not all
they're not
10 feet
complying.
off the curb, no.
They're not complying.
And I think we even said 15 feet from the corner to comply with, on the construction fencing, to comply with visibility,
Yeah.
sight distance
Right, on a
requirements.
corner lot, but.
Yeah, that gets to the point which I do feel like it's a safety issue, and I do think that I understand not wanting to be heavy-handed, but I also understand that when it's a safety concern, that
But I appreciate what Ashley said about if it's not a real problem at an intersection,
Yeah.
then it's not, if it's not obstruct, I think the ordinance talks about obstructing sight distances, so if it doesn't obstruct sight distances because of topography or
I
whatever
agree
else,
with that.
it's like, it's not a violation. And I certainly understand not wanting to, like, have people feel like the city's harassing them over things that if it's a real safety hazard, at some intersections it really is, and at others it's not.
Right.
And I'm all for enforcing where it really is, and if you need our help by sending you screenshots, I'll help you.
Sure.
I've
Yes.
seen screenshots.
If you see one, feel free to send it, but again, we'll do a better job of patrolling those for ourselves and make sure we're doing that.
All right. That is the last agenda item other than the reports, which are there for your review if you choose to do so. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Already? It seems early.
So moved.
Hey, so, by the way, thank you so much. You did an awesome job.
Yes.
Yes.
And I
Alright.
want to thank our police chief for an awesome night
was
last night.
great.
Yes.
Yes.
That was
It was
wonderful.
exceptional. All of our vendors are happy. That was just great work. Ashley too. I'll include whoever on staff worked on that project. I think all of the emergency service personnel to a person said, we love coming here, we love doing this with Rolling Wood, and I think we extend your appreciations to those people too, those fellows and guys and
Yes.
girls. So thank you, great job.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Meeting adjourned at 10:00.